Welcome one and all. It's time to get succulent. 5 games of Kings of War, 2,425 points, Swords of Summer at BritCon. So, Kings of War back on the menu, and as you can see from the thumbnail, the Abyssal Dwarfs also back on the menu. And perhaps for the first time in a while, I picked a list for this event for no other reason than I think this list is very powerful. I haven't been able to say that very often with Kings of War, especially playing as Night Stalkers when I've often shoehorned impressive looking models in, purely because they are impressive looking models. But with this Abyssal Dwarf list, I feel like it is very powerful. So, let's get rid of the thumbnail and you can immediately have a look at the list there. So before I go through it, I'll just run you down the scoring system for the tournament. So it's unusual scoring system. So you get 2 points for a loss, 4 for a draw, 6 for a win. You then get up to 5 points based on how many victory points you achieved during the game. So if you get more than 5, it's capped at 5. And then the kill differential. Now you don't see that very often in Kings of War these days. Often it'll just be purely how much you kill, but it is on the differential for this event. So if you kill an equal amount of stuff, you get 10 points each, I think. Could be 12. Anyway, you get an equal amount of points there. I think it is 12 actually. And then if you completely table someone and don't lose anything, you get 24 points. So there's a huge amount of points available for killing, way more than for winning or for scoring victory points. Obviously, if you want to get maximum points, then you would want to win as well. And killing things is often on the road to winning the game anyway. So it's not completely skewed. It's very unlikely that someone would lose all their games, but still have enough points to win the event, even though it's theoretically possible. If by some miracle they nearly table their opponent in every game, but somehow lose every game by just not sitting on any of the objectives. So under those circumstances, could be possible. So my list, it's Abyssal Dwarves, as you can see. There is a lot of Defense 6 in here. So first of all, we've got the Immortal Guard, who obviously are only Defense 5, but unwaverable at -17 with regeneration. So you're going to see a theme with this list. 2 Troops of Gargoyles, kind of outside the theme, but they're the chaff unit, and they do have regeneration anyway, as if they ever get to use it, because they're always dead as soon as they get touched by anything. A pointy stick will take them down. 3 Hordes of Lesser Obsidian Golems, and I've run them as a big wall, all 3 of these units before, but I'm leaning into, as they say, the ability to get the wounds back on them once they have been hurt. So we've got the Healing Brew on one of them, very inexpensive item, and for a Defense 6 unit, that's really worth a lot more than putting it on something that's lower defense. We've got Hand's Sanguinary Scripture on one of the Hordes, and that gives them Life Leech 1, so that's 10 points, but obviously you'll be able to use it repeatedly if they keep getting into combat. And then the final Horde have got Liliana's Tear, which makes them immune to Brutal and Dread and such. So it can effectively give them an extra point of nerve in some situations. Then we've got a Horde of Grotesques. So again, a high defense unit, but defense 5 here. And they are waverable, so we've got Dwarven Ale on them. So all the way down, even up to this Hellfane and the Greater Obsidian Golem, 2 big defense 6 Titans, unwaverable. We're seeing that all the main units are either unwaverable or I've put Dwarven Ale on them. So they've got a 2 out of 3 chance of ignoring a waver. We have then got 2 Ironcasters. And when we get to the 3 casters I've got in this list, you'll then see the second part of the plan. So Ironcaster number 1 has Shroud of the Saint, which puts his heal up to heal 5, which is very significant when you're healing Defense 6 units. It's also got Surge 8. I've not given them Fireball because they're not going to be using that. They're going to be surging and healing. Ironcaster number 2 has Surge, Heal 3, Conjurer's Staff, which allows him to reroll one of the casting dice, so could get an extra point of healing back. Also, Scorched Earth. So it's an extra spell, and that spell, if you get any hits, the unit that it affects will suffer a hindered charge than if they charge in the following turn, and they can't benefit from Strider or Pathfinder for that turn. So, when you look at the Hexcaster as well, with Weakness and Hex, but especially Weakness, so when you combine Weakness and Scorched Earth, and a big wall of Defense 6, and lots of healing ability, and regeneration on some of the units, like the Grotesques and the Immortal Guard, you start to see that we've got a lot of very tough to shift units that are going to be getting wounds back, and doubling down on the fact that they're so tough, I'm then going to be weakening enemy units, so it's harder for them to do wounds, and I'm going to be scorching the earth on the enemy units, so they make hindered charges, which is usually -1 to hit, and a loss of some thunderous charge, which is extra leaning towards the high defense side of this list, which is all of this apart from the gargoyles. And we've got an Overmaster on Ancient Winged Halfbreed because I want some speed as well. So it's not the most optimal dragon, I would say. I've put the Staying Stone on it, so it's a bit less likely to get wavered. And that's just how many points I had left. So it's only 9 attacks. So ideally using it as a threat, and you can throw it in the front line as well. It can stand up to some punishment with that defense 5. So that and the Grotesques are the defense 5 units on the front line, and the Immortal Guard, but all with decent nerve. The nerve of the golems at -17, it's not outrageously high, which is why I like the ability to heal those wounds back with these Ironcasters, because they can get ground down. Once you've started to take 2 or 3 damage, suddenly you're 1 mediocre combat away from the opponent actually being allowed to roll the nerve dice. So getting wounds back is the plan. And I think this is a very good list that should, in theory, work together well. We've got a big wall of defense 6 and some very tough defense 5 units as well, making the enemy weaker and then healing my wounds back. And most of this stuff, all of it apart from the gargoyles, is vicious. So I come up against anything that, for example, I'm wasting all my crushing strength on, like zombies, then at least I'm vicious against them. So I'm going to be doing a lot of wounds. And this is the special tournament character that I have access to for this event. So if you're an evil army, you get this one. And the good army is a very similar character, but it has a couple of differences. So it's a flyer, and speed 7, fights on 4, defense 4, dash 15, 5 attacks. But its special rules are where the interesting stuff really is. So it's got Strider, it's got Mighty, Stealthy, which I don't think anyone noticed. I don't remember too much shooting being directed at this guy though. It's an individual, and it has Lightning Bolt 5. It also has Cloak of Death, so if it lands near enemy units, they just take a point of damage. It has Aura of Dread, so if it's near enemy units, they suffer from Dread, which does stack with Brutal or Shattering, and the Grotesques have Brutal, so that could stack there nicely. Bring and Battle Wargaming says, just getting into Kings of War and enjoy catching up with your reports. Excellent. You're definitely in the right place if you want wall-to-wall, red-hot, steaming, fresh Kings of War content. There's a lot of it on this channel. Then this caster character also has Host Shadow Beast 2. Now it's not just regular Host Shadow Beast, this can be cast on any unit, not just individuals, and needs to just succeed with one of those 4+, and then they can attack with an extra 5 attacks on a 3+ with Crushing Strength 3. Now, only at the end of day 1 did many of us realise that this could be used on any unit and not just individuals, because it's a special Host Shadow Beast, not the standard Host Shadow Beast. So we did realise later on that it could be used on any units. The goody version of this has an Aura of Fury instead of an Aura of Dread, and it has Radiance of Life instead of Cloak of Death. So very similar. But importantly, this thing is not worth any points, so if you kill that, it doesn't affect the kill differential at all, so you can kind of throw it away if it's had its contribution for the game. In Game 1, there is a picture of Game 1, and the scenario is Control, and I'm up against the Dwarves. So let's see what we've got in here. there are 2 regiments of shield breakers, and they are a crushing strength dwarf infantry unit with defense 4. So when I'm looking at enemy lists, I'm looking how much crushing strength do they have, how much thunderous charge do they have, and how much speed do they have. Those are the main issues I think that I can run into. If an army has got a ton of crushing strength and thunderous that's going to cut through my defense, then that could be a problem. And if there's a lot of speed, then they can start outmaneuvering my mostly very slow block of an army. And depending on the scenario as well, if I have to spread out or if I have to actually move at all, it would be much nicer if the enemy just walked towards me and run into the big wall of rocks and dies, but I can't imagine many people are going to try that. There are some Ironwatch crossbows. There are some sharpshooters, who are kind of longer range sniper dwarves. 2 mastiff hunting packs. There is Golluck's Fury, which is a huge big steel behemoth with crushing strength and wild charge. And it's just pretty tasty. It's got Strider as well. It's got a good gun on the back of it as well. That is quite expensive. We've got a Stone Priest with Bane Chant, the most important thing probably there. There is a Berserker Lord, and the Berserker Lord is on a Brock. There is a Steel Juggernaut, which is a bit of a shooty kind of hero large infantry. Yeah, so it's a big, I think it scores, got unit strength, yeah, unit strength 1. So pretty solid defense. I think it's defense 6, this one. There is Faber Ironheart, who's like the upgraded version of the Steel Juggernaut. And there is Dwarf Lord on Large Beast, which is a very common choice. It's fast, it scores, it hits hard, pretty solid. Comparable to the Northern Alliance Frostfang Lord, I think. I don't know if the stats match up exactly, but it's in that genre of unit. So, control. What do we look for in control? Well, there are 6 table sections, and if for each one of those you're controlling with your unit strength at the end of the game, you're going to get a victory point. If you control the one central square in your opponent's half of the table, that's going to be worth 2 victory points. So what I usually like to do is focus my units down these 2 lines, these 2 lanes here, because that's right on the borderline of each section. So then at the end of the game, you've then got options regarding which section you want to be in. So if you're contesting pretty much this centre line, because then you can also hop back and forth there. So this area is key, this area is key. Units like gargoyles are going to be handy to keep alive at the end of the game. So depending on the scenario, you're either going to want to throw them in front to block enemy multi-charges, for instance, or you want to hold them back until the end and jump onto objectives. I don't have a huge number of scoring units compared to some army lists. So how many have I got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So if the gargoyles get themselves killed, I'm down to 8. Which is not a lot, because as soon as we get into a fight, I'm going to be losing some units, which means I wouldn't have enough to actually contest all the areas. Sometimes you'll need multiple units in an area as well. So the gargoyle's probably not going to be thrown away in this game. There's my special character there. We have got lots of terrain, so we've got this big piece of impassable terrain here, so sending the Greater Obsidian Golem next to that, putting the Hellfane in front of the woods because it has Strider. So it's not going to worry about that. It can sit in the woods, and if the enemy wants to come and make hindered charges against me, that's okay. Hindered charge against defense 6 probably isn't going to kill it. Well, at least that's the theory. On this side, we've got the Grotesques a bit further out because they're faster, so they can potentially work their way in if I need to contest more areas in here. And the Immortal Guard. So the Immortal Guard, the thinking here is, because the enemy have got some faster... they've got some of the Mastiff Hounds and the large beast there, the Lord. So he could end up moving inwards to get involved in the big fight, which is probably going to happen around here somewhere. And if we end up with the Sharpshooters and the Immortal Guard, I don't think the Sharpshooters will kill the Immortal Guard over the course of the game. By the time they can even see them, because there's hills in the way. So if I could get the Immortal Guard into this table section, I think I would be able to hold it against the sharpshooters by having superior unit strength. Gargoyles will then likely be used to get the corner sections at the end if they are available, and the golems can either go forward or back from the centre line to either secure my own area or the enemy central area there. So, if we look at what we're opposite here, sharpshooters, hounds, juggernaut, and the lord on large beast up against the immortal guard and the grotesques. So I haven't really got any inspiring over on this side. I've got my overmaster at the back rather than all the way out on a flank, because that's a really tough dwarf centre with Gollux Fury in there as well. I want to have all my meat in the middle, and as units like this start to advance, if they want to come up beyond that point to engage with this, then that means we're going to start seeing flanks open up there. And I've got the shielding of this forest. If I come up to about here, for example, and the Dwarf Lord on a large beast is there, you wouldn't want to get charged by that. So that's why he's over here. Gargoyles are just hiding so they can't be shot behind my other units because they will die immediately and they're an obvious target. I've got my Hexcaster between the two units of golems, so he can't be charged, and he can also cast his spell out from in there when he's in sight of the enemy. Got my Ironcaster with the extra healing back there, and I've got my other Ironcaster over there, between the greater golem and the lesser golems on that side. I've actually got tokens on all my units pointing out what upgrades they have, but you'll probably see on the close-ups, potentially. So he's got the Shroud, you can actually see it written there. And yeah, there we go. So Gargoyles hiding in the enemy army. We have got in the middle, we've got a couple of these phalanx regiments. I don't know if I actually went over those on the list, I might have missed those. And there's Gollux Fury. There is the big horde with Brew of Strength. There are the Ironwatch crossbows. And over here we've got the two Shieldbreaker regiments. We have got the Brocklord and we've got the other Steel Juggernaut. I'm not sure which one's the Steel Juggernaut and which one's Faber Ironheart, but they do look pretty much the same and they do a very similar job. So, on to turn 1. And I believe I won the roll-off and gave turn 1 to my opponent because I want the last turn, especially with my gargoyles, because then I'll be able to bounce into whichever territory I need to claim in the last turn to secure the win. But, as I stated earlier, a lot of the scoring at this event is based on killing. So winning the scenario does help, but you do want to kill lots of stuff and not lose things as well. If you kill an equal amount, then you're both going to get a lot of points. So you want to be killing and not be killed. So hopefully my list should be good at that. So my opponent is pushing up on this side, not worrying about my Immortal Guard and Grotesques, because it's not going to get in their charge range. And in the middle, the Mastiffs just moving up. You can see quite a few of these units have got throwing dogs in them, which can be deployed. The Brocklord goes up behind this tower. So he's a little bit of a threat, less so because my front line is so tough. If he went in as a support piece, I would be more concerned about him. But just out there on his own, he's not really a threat to anything on my front line. He can certainly pin things. So my individuals obviously would not like to fight him because he's just nasty for that role. So they're not going to be visible to him. I'm going to keep them hidden. And there's no reason for him to charge into any of these big walls of rock unless everything else is advancing and he needs to lock them down. So he is hiding there for now. I've got a total of Surge 16 available to me. One of those casters has a reroll as well. So on average, might be able to surge a unit about 9 inches if I use both my casters. So that is an option that's open to me at times if it presents itself. And you can see the sharpshooters put a point of damage onto the grotesques. The grotesques are taller than a hill, by the way, so they can be seen over a hill. I think they could draw line of sight past the hill there anyway. And also I'll point out that at this event the hills are height 3, which is the same as cavalry. So the golems and the grotesques can see over the hill, they can also be seen, and a titan standing on a hill can see over the towers and over the woods, but otherwise they can't. So, onto my turn. And you can see I've advanced. I'm not too concerned about being charged by anything. I would like to avoid multi-charges in general, but there's not a lot of speed coming towards me, so I can advance pretty freely up the battlefield. I have put this guy here. So he is dipping his toe into the woods. So with a flyer you can start in difficult terrain. As long as you don't land in it, then you won't be making a hindered charge. So he's in the woods so he can see out. The Hellfane is very unconcerned about being charged by anything here. This area of the battlefield here is a rare spot that there is nothing to cause hindered charges. There's just this hill, which obviously isn't going to be an issue. So that's why 2 hordes of golems are on here. Because there's nothing going to hinder them unless they go all the way into enemy territory. So the area where I want to be anyway is actually quite a good place to be fighting around this sort of area. Over there, there's not a great deal to worry about charge-wise from the dwarves. They're not very fast, so I'm able to push things up. The gargoyles are hanging back because they do not want to die. That's their entire job, is to just sit out the whole game and then dive into a control area at the end. We've put a bit of damage onto these mastiffs, the hunting pack. Both of them, in fact. I think that one becomes wavered, actually. Or is it weakness that's been affecting them? Could be both. So, not much happening yet. I've made sure not to give the Brocklord a charge on any of my individuals. So, for projectile attack, I've got weakness from the Hexcaster, and his weakness and Hex do damage, which is nice, with piercing 1. So you can actually take out chaff with him, potentially, which is quite good if he doesn't have any good targets for his other spells. And I've got lightning bolt on the special event character who's here. My 2 Ironcasters do not have any offensive spells at all. They've only got healing and surge, and then this one's got scorched earth, which doesn't do damage. So on to turn 2 for the dwarves, and positioning here so that I could charge. I won't be able to charge, I think, the king on large beast. I won't be able to charge him with the grotesques. I won't be able to charge this guy with the grotesques because I wouldn't have the angle, because I've only got 1 pivot to work with, so I would end up going like that and miss him. So I could only hit that unit, which I may well do. And they're pretty much just hiding behind there, so I don't get any big juicy charges on them. And another unit that's not cared about at all, I don't think I wavered them because I think they've come forwards here. So the Mastiffs have come forward onto the hill. So at this point, when they're on the hill, I kind of want to deal with them, because if they charge off the hill, they will get some thunderous charge, so they could do some damage. But I don't think it's imperative that I charge up there and kill them unless I can safely get away out of charge range again, because I don't want to be multi-charged by all these dwarf units in one go. So you can see I'm measuring out distances here, and my opponent, we're checking on its charge range so he wouldn't deploy or wouldn't move any of his units into it. There's his good special character there with Aura of Radiance of Life. The Brocklord has gone from here over here, so he's not in the woods. I think that's woods. Let me just check. Actually, no, I think that's just the difficult terrain. I don't think that is woods, because it doesn't have holes in it. So just looking over the difficult terrain. Again, this particular matchup, he's not that threatening to me unless he can get to my individuals. So I'm not too worried about him. I'd be more concerned if, for example, these 2 units went in and he went in the flank. That could be trouble. So I'm not ideally going to get into their charge range yet. The grotesques take another point of damage from the sharpshooters as well. And a bit of damage presumably from the lightning bolt, or maybe Golluck's Fury with his gun. I'm not sure that was in range yet, but 2 damage onto these guys who are next to the greater golem, and then up to 5 more shooting on them, and 1 point onto the Hellfane. So do I have a lot to worry about here? In terms of what I'm going to do, I can put the grotesques into these mastiffs, and I can put my flyer into the dwarf king on large beast. Or lord, is it a king or a lord? I can't remember. But regardless, I think my flyer is going to beat him, is going to outgrind him eventually. The grotesques should kill that chaff unit, and then they will deal with this guy probably as well. So that flank should be good, meaning that I don't have to worry about being flanked from that side. And on this side, the only thing actually flanking me is an individual who isn't that much of a concern, so I can kind of avoid him and keep my individuals hidden between my units so he can't see them. I can put both these units of golems onto the hill to fight there, because I measure and determine that if I kill it and then go backwards an inch, then they'll be safe, out of the dwarves' charge range. So, my turn 2. We have got some action. So, what's going on here? Well, here, these golems charge into that unit. Oh no, they double charge into this unit with the greater golem. So they both go in there. I think... Was it just a straight up double charge? I don't think I had to actually surge. I think it was just a straight up charge. So double charged into that unit, killed it, keep them level with each other so this unit can't flank him. If, for example, I backed them up an inch and they could see him, then they could then turn and go for his flanks. They're staying level. With this big defense 6 block, the most important thing is not giving up flanks, because your opponent, if they're not getting tons of attacks, it's going to be really tricky for them to get through. I've healed some wounds back on this unit as well with my healing abilities, and I've put the gargoyles here to cover my individual. So if this Brocklord wants to charge the gargoyles, then he can, basically. That means he's not supporting another unit, which means I would end up winning this fight here. So the greater golem can be charged by crossbows, I think, and this guy. And one thing I don't believe I spotted was that he can also be charged by Golluck's Fury, which I didn't notice that it was actually faster than the rest of the dwarves. Over here, the grotesques murderlize the Mastiff hunting pack, and my big dragon starts putting wounds onto the large beast dwarf lord / king. And in the middle, I kill the other chaff unit and then back up with my lesser obsidian golems out of charge range of all the dwarves. The Hellfane also took a couple of pot shots at this unit with its pistols and did a bit of damage. These gargoyles are hiding. Most of my casters are just staying back. So what's going to hit me now? Golluck's Fury, and this guy can certainly go in here. So I'm feeling quite good about it. I'm not being flanked by anything, which is what I usually worry about. And I've got most of the enemy threat contained in the middle here. Turn 3 for the dwarves. So we do get this out, and it's determined that he is in the flank, but we then put the arc on this guy to see if he can actually see the golem. And because... Okay, so it looked like he could, but we realised that actually, because his arm was poking, his base should actually be here, because they double charged into the same unit. So he didn't actually go over as far as he should have done. So it actually works out nicely, which means that he cannot be charged by Golluck's Fury because he's actually out of his line of sight. Because his view is kind of like that. So he is actually here, slightly further across. So he can't see him. So that was very, very lucky, because I didn't realise that he was a threat there. So safe from that for now. I think this is Faber Ironheart who is fighting the grotesques. So Golluck's Fury decides to steam into these lesser obsidian golems instead, and these phalanx troops move up onto the hill to protect its flank from this unit, presumably. And the other units are just coming up behind. And over here, the Iron Watch crossbows decide they're going to get steaming into combat, along with either Faber or the Steel Juggernaut. I can't remember which is which. This one might be Faber, actually. It's a bit more colourful. And the Brocklord goes into the flank, so he ignores the gargoyles, and he elects to support this unit instead. So this unit could potentially be in trouble with all this going on here. Hold on, no, that's not the crossbows. That is the shield breakers. That is the crossbows. So there are some crossbows in the unit, but there's mostly hammers. So those are the crossbows. So he's going to be fine. 4 wounds done onto the Hellfane now from shooting. And yep, we've got a dead horde of golems. 12 damage, so they're toast. Just 1 damage done to the greater though, so that's okay. And then 6 done to this unit from Golluck's Fury. But that's not going to be enough, so Golluck's Fury is now going to be flank charged by a Hellfane, which is never fun for anybody. And 5 damage is done to my Overmaster from the large beast there. So I've got regeneration though, so I'm pretty confident I'm going to win in the end. And the Grotesques take some damage as well, but it's going to be tough for him to take them out. They've got regeneration and Dwarven Ale as well, so even if they get wavered. So we've lost a unit, but I'm in a pretty good position to take out Golluck's Fury. And we'll see what else I've got up my sleeve. Because what I'm thinking is that I can get these guys in a position so they can join in this fight as well. Turn 3. So, well, what's going on here, you ask? Well, this guy decides he's not going to bother with the crossbows. Those 2 units aren't worrying me particularly. I've only got gargoyles and some casters over here. So I'm just going to turn sideways, walk over here, make sure I'm an inch away to make it legal, and then surge into the flank of them. Tasty. So that's what happens. So I have to use this hero, this special unique character, because the situation we end up in, I want these guys to go in the front. But if I put them into the front, the unit will hang over the edge, which means that when I try to surge him in, he would touch them first and wouldn't be able to make it, because I can't turn him to a different angle. He has to go in a straight line out there. And the only reason he can do this is because he's perfectly square, so he can actually turn on the spot and walk away, and he's fast enough to get more than an inch away from them. So I have to fly this guy over here and land level with the edge of the unit, so that when the golems charge in, they would then end up here, which means that the side of the unit is then eligible for me to surge into. Because these units are pretty tough, so I want to double up on them and make sure I'm killing what I hit, and it's kind of taking these units out the game as well for a bit. So that is the plan. So that's going to delete this unit, which it does, as you can see. And I don't know if these guys can see his rear, but I'm not sure, but even if they can definitely see the flank of this unit, but they're going to be hindered and they're only crossbowmen. So I'm not too concerned. Golluck's Fury gets hit, but does not get killed by the looks of it, so Hellfane and the golems in the front weren't enough to take him out, which is unfortunate. And over here, I was able to get these guys in the flank and the Grotesques in the front there, which is nice. And we've done some decent damage, but not killed him yet. The Grotesques didn't regenerate any wounds back. I've got 1 wound back on the big dragon, and hit the large beast. So I was initially not thinking I could actually get these guys into combat, because the Grotesques are touching the hill, but they're not actually on the hill. So it's determined that I can see him. I wasn't completely sure on this, but my opponent was very sure that this was the correct ruling. So I'm happy to go along with it. So that this unit, they're touching the hill, but they're not on it. So I can see him, who is definitely on the hill, with this unit on the ground. Okay, so they end up in the flank. If that's wrong, then let me know, so I don't have to scour through the rulebook, which I'll probably end up doing anyway, to make sure. I forgot to do it after the game, or at the end of the day, though. So we're going to get hit back now, obviously, and these guys are going to be able to come in here, and all these dwarves are going to be able to fight. Well, most of them, because Golluck's Fury is still alive, so it's kind of in the way. So we do get the crossbows into the flank of these golems, but that's not too much of a concern. However, we do also get the Brocklord into the flank of them, which is a bit more of a concern, and it's going to be a lot of attacks, so you never know, they could do something there. Rear charge from this Phalanx Regiment into the Hellfane, who I've replaced with this Titan-sized base, because his nose is too pointy, he can't physically face any direction at the moment. Yeah, so this is into turn 4 now, for the dwarves. So he countercharges into the Grotesques. This fight's still going on. And these guys take a bit of damage from lightning bolts from the special character. And this guy takes some damage from shooting from Faber Ironheart by the looks of it, or the yeah, I think it's just him because they are shield breakers, but they're turning to get back into the action now. Grotesques take more damage, but they're still hanging on, and the Overmaster takes more damage, but also hangs on. Well, Elfane is dead. So it initially lived, but then the once per game tournament reroll was used to kill the Hellfane. So the Hellfane was finished off with the use of that once per game reroll, which can be used on any dice roll apart from the turn 7 roll. So he's gone, and they're rearranging themselves a bit, because there's 2 units in there. Only 3 damage done to this unit. And still feeling pretty good about this, but actually they're up to 9 now. So there is some damage done here, but they are not killed. I think they're on 9 as well, but still hanging in there. So, what are we going to do about this? He can charge the flank of Golluck's Fury or that Horde, and the Gargoyles are still alive. They just need to hide for another turn and make sure they're not getting themselves killed before they can score. And in the middle we've got counter-charging options. So let's see what I do. So I counter-charge into the crossbows and kill them and then bounce off. And over here, my Greater Obsidian Golem went into the flank of this Horde and did lots of damage, but didn't kill it. He's actually facing this way, but his head and his horns and his fists are too pokey, so I've actually put him in this way, but he's actually facing into the unit. The 2 Golem units in the middle, that one killed them, and this one killed Golluck's Fury, and then turned to face the incoming threat. So they're kind of back-to-back Golems. And over here, I do kill the King on Large Beast and then turn inwards to affect the game with the dragon now. And I don't manage to kill Mr. Ironheart, unfortunately. I think that's just the regular steel Juggernaut, actually. Don't manage to kill him yet, so all these guys are still tied up. But in this scenario, it's not that big of a deal being stuck out on the flank with a couple of units, because you're going to be able to use them to score in those zones anyway. So, heading into turn 5, the situation is, I think both these units are in the front here of these golems if they want to hit it. Gargoyles aren't really in too much danger, so they're going to be able to score for me. The enemy have got this section. They can potentially start running one of these 2 units into this section, which would be more than enough to either beat or match the Gargoyles if I head it over there. Grotesques and the Immortal Guard should be enough to deal with these 2 sections here, so the dragon can fly off next turn, hopefully into someone's rear or flank. Sharpshooters will only be able to hold that down if I put nothing of value in there, so even a small unit with unit strength 2 would beat them, I think. In the middle, I think it's looking pretty good. These golems don't have too much threatening them at this stage. There's him, the Dwarf Brock Lord, who is a potential threat. They're on 5 damage. I think this big guy is undamaged, though. And he's on 5, but there's nothing threatening him apart from sharpshooters who only have 5 shots. So, turn 5 for the Dwarves. Steel Juggernauts back into them again. You can see they keep healing wounds back. So both these units would, whichever one he hit. But he's defense 6, that's why it's taken such a long time to chew through it. This guy... Okay, this guy, which is the Dwarf Standard Bearer, charges into my dragon, because then this guy can cast Host Shadow Beast on it, and then it'll actually have 5 pretty good attacks against me, which will stop me flying, possibly. Okay, so I think both these units go in here, but I'm not 100% sure. Find out in a second. So, the Brock Lord goes after one of my Ironcasters. Mr. Ironheart, I think this is, goes after the Hexcaster but falls off the hill. And my unique event character gets charged by the Shield Breakers, but he's not worth any points. Not much is going to be accomplished over here, but he does waver the Grotesques, but they do have Dwarven Ale. I also get my Overmaster wavered, which is kind of annoying, so those 5 Shadow Beast attacks succeeded. And damage is being racked up here. I think this unit actually might have been wavered and failed their headstrong roll. So that's why they're not involved in the fight, they're just pivoting. Or spinning round on the spot. So 3 damage done to the Hexcaster, so I'm not going to be doing much spell casting. The Ironcaster gets wavered, which is good, because it means he's not dead and isn't giving up points when kill point differential is such a big deal at this event. And if he wants to finish him off, he's going to have to dedicate another turn with the Brock Lord to do it, which is going to be an annoyance for him. But my event special character is dead, but he's not worth any points, so I'm not that bothered this late in the game. So I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. And what have I got up my sleeve here? Well, turn 5. Who is there? So this unit charges into the shield breakers, kills them, and then turns around to face this way again. The Greater Obsidian Golem finishes off that horde, which is nice. And these guys charge into the Phalanx Regiment and do some damage. And the Immortal Guard and the Grotesques finish off the Steel Juggernauts. So the Immortal Guard are going this way. They want to try and take that table section. The Grotesques are just going to hang back here, because they're not going to be able to join in the rest of the game probably now. And yeah, not much going on because I can't do much with him. I do get some wounds back with regeneration. And my gargoyles are just hiding so that they can't be annihilated by things. These ones are ready to pounce, so they can just hold my middle section or they can start going into that one. But the enemy are running out of scoring units rapidly, so it's almost certain I'm going to win the game at this stage. However, we do have to deal with this. We've got this guy charging into the rear, so he's going to have a lot of attacks. And these guys in the front. This is in turn 6 now, so we'll see if they can kill that unit. Grotesques take more sharpshooter damage, which could be an issue if we get to turn 7. The big guy gets wavered again, with the same combo I think. And that horde of golems is killed. So, that's one unit gone, but I've still got plenty left to work with. So, over here the Brock Lord does finish off my Ironcaster at the second attempt. And what are we going to do with my turn 6? Well, I'm probably going to charge these guys into Faber Ironheart. I'm going to turn this guy round, move him there, and surge into the flank of that regiment and annihilate them utterly. And the gargoyles are going to spread out and score me some points. So, you can see that I do some good damage to him. I kill the regiment with that surge into the flank, which I had to get one of my Ironcasters in position to do, obviously. Which is just him, he's the only one that's left. And yeah, there's not much going on. Just moving into position, moving these two in there in case there's a turn 7 and one of them gets shot off. I swarm some gargoyles into the enemy central area to make sure I'm claiming that, and other gargoyles down here. So I'm holding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because I'm holding 2 for this one, and my enemy is not holding any table sections at all, by my reckoning. Yeah, because I think these guys are in my half still. It might not look like it from this angle, but I think the centre line is there. So when we check and when we measured it, you can see actually the divider of the table there, so it's about like that. So we did work out that these guys are actually in this section, so they control it. They control that section, they control that section, he controls there. Are we going to get turn 7? No. So that's just the end of the game, and it's a win. It's a decent win as well, because I managed to kill quite a lot and didn't lose that much. It ended up slightly closer because some of the things that I'd never tried to kill that are actually worth a decent number of points, like the Brock Lord, and there's a couple of other little characters around there, but I've still got some expensive units left. So you can see I've still got a couple of Titans, 1 Golem Horde, and the Grotesques are expensive. All my Gargoyles are alive. So yeah, it was a decent win, and puts me on, I think it's table 2 maybe for the next round. So here are some pictures of some of the armies. Some salamanders. You'll have seen a lot of these armies before, actually, if you've followed this channel for a while. We have got some goblins with Night Stalker allies, which is an interesting combo. We have what I believe is forces of nature. We've got some Northern Alliance, very nice. And we've got, obviously, the loveliest army of them all, my Abyssal Dwarfs. We've got dwarves. Okay, so this is a Ratkin slave army. I don't think it actually has that many Ratkin slaves in it. I think it's just one regiment of them. But it's on a very attractive display board. And I do make a point of not voting for display boards for best painted army, by the way. Because even though a lot of time and effort goes into them, they're not really part of the army when you put them out on the table. So I don't usually let that sway my decision. And also, it's not practical for everybody to have a display board, I think. So I don't want to discriminate against those people that don't have space in their homes for display boards. But this army did get one of my votes. You could vote for 2 armies, so this was one of my votes. Not for the display board, just because the actual units I thought were very attractively painted. But I did take a little video of the display board as well. You'll see why in a second. So there are some of the units which I think are very nice. And here you go. Look at that. It's a working train in the mine with all kinds of LEDs and moving things. Yeah, the video stops there, but this guy's going up and down. Let's play that again. Very cool, very impressive. And yeah, so it did get one of my votes. We've got some Night Stalkers. These are very attractive as well. Nice colour scheme there. And it's not just the paint job on these, it's also the basing, I think, is very nice. They're coming out of a well there. Their bodies dangling on chains from the Shadow Hulk. Just pretty cool all round. Got some elves facing the wrong way. We have got some Brotherhood. And these are actually really nicely painted as well. They're especially the peasants. I found the peasants very, very nice. We've got some more dwarves. Some old school dwarves. So obviously I've got some old school dwarves as well. So I've got some of these iron breakers, the classic iron breakers. And I don't have this many classic dwarves though. Most of these are from around the time that I started my dwarf army or earlier. So I don't have most of them. So next up, I'm playing the Ratkin Slaves list in the mine. So what is in it? Slave Warriors, 1 regiment. Slave Nightmares, 2 hordes. So they are kind of like... What's the difference between these and Ogre Boomers? Well, they have higher defense, but they don't have piercing on their shooting. So that could be a big deal against my army, where they would want that piercing in order to be worth shooting with. 4 Vermintide Swarms, so really crummy chaff unit, low nerve, and they'll fill a similar role to the Gargoyles, they're just not as fast. 2 Slave Tunnel Runner regiments, which are quite scary. They hit on 4s, but 24 attacks. Crush 1, Thunderous 1. 1 with Boots of Striding, 1 with Brew of Haste. So that is actually quite fast. That is potential 18-inch charge, which is faster than most of my units. There are 2 Slave Death Engine Impalers, which are Crushing Strength 2, which is obviously quite scary. And they have Vicious as well. And Wild Charge D3 for extra range. An Overmaster with the Wings of Honeymaze, so a flying hero with 5 attacks. An Ironcaster with Fireball, Bane Chant critically. Bane Chant's very important in this matchup. And Mind Fog. Taskmaster on a Chariot with Blade of the Beast Slayer, so good against beastly units. And Golek Skin Flayer, which is a hero chariot, which is like an extra powerful version of the... Oh no, that's the one. It's Kryza's Gore Impaler that's the extra powerful version of the Death Engine, I think. Yeah, and this one is just a hero on a chariot. So Crushing Strength 1, Dread, which does stack with the evil event character, I think. There is Rallying for slave units. Let's see who is a slave. The Death Engines, Tunnel Runners, and the Nightmares, and the Slave Warriors, so lots of them. So Rallying, quite good there. And then the Gore Impaler is a chariot. It's just a better version of the Death Engine Impaler. So hits on 3s. Dash 16, which is the same. And what else is different? Both defense 5. It's got Crushing 2. And these guys have Crushing 2 as well. It's also Vicious, Wild Charge D3. Okay, Battering Ram. That means that it can overrun when it kills any unit, not just an individual. So that is quite interesting. But I'll point out, it's not going to come up in this game, but I didn't spot that rule on the list. So I'm going into this game unaware that it can do that. So we'll see if that comes back to bite me at all, but spoiler alert, it doesn't affect the game. So, it is the Dominate scenario. Now, this is the kind of list that I think is a decent counter to what I'm bringing. So, there's a lot of Crushing Strength and Thunderous Charge around about the place. There's a source of Bane Chant, and most of the hard-hitting stuff is faster than my army. Those are the key things that could make it tricky to deal with. The enemy army also has higher unit strength than I do, which could be tricky for Dominate. On the plus side, I've got these two lovely, big, impassable pieces of terrain that I can park a wall of stone in and be in the scoring area, because the middle's about here. So in this scenario, obviously you have to have a unit mostly within 12 inches of the centre. So I've put all my unit strength units in the middle, and I've just got unit strength 1 units on the flank, including my flyer, and they're kind of to deter this flank rolling in. I don't want anything coming round the back if I'm going to be holding onto this area. So if we do get into a big brawl in the middle, I've then got more golems and grotesques who can come in as a second wave, and they're worth quite a lot of unit strength. So let's dive into it. The Death Engines are quite a scary unit with lots of attacks. So the main thing is, don't want to get flanked by this army. I think in another scenario where I had to spread out more, I'd be more concerned about that. In this one, probably not. But don't want to get flanked, don't want to get multi-charged, because things like the Death Engines multi-charging, it's a random number of attacks, but if they roll well, they are definitely capable of killing my Defense 6 units in one round. So, we don't want them to do that. Turn 1, I'm going first, and I push up into the middle. And I surge these 2 units to get them a little bit further as well with my Iron Casters. And just spread out a bit over here, trying to deter the enemy from coming down round the back here. Turn 1 for the enemy, and they're not advancing too wildly far. Not much of an advance at all, just kind of staring at me. And very uneventful turn 1. Turn 2. I continue to build this solid defense 6 line here. Now, the only potential issue is because there's the center point of the battlefield there. It comes down to about here. So, in order for me to get all my units in it, I need to go forward slightly beyond this bit of mountain here, which means that I could at some point open up a flank into my greater golem. But he's only worth 1 unit strength, but again, not so much about that. It's about the kill points differential, and he's expensive. So, he has got a wall guarding him. So it's not the worst thing to happen. Over on this side, you can see that I've fired off some damage. I think it was the Hellfane shooting at the chaff. Does some damage there. So I've put the Hellfane into charge range of a couple of units there if they roll high on their wild charge. If something wants to attack the Hellfane at this stage, I'm not overly concerned, but we'll see. Turn 2, and the slaves... Oh yeah, in my turn 2, I forgot to move my special character because it kind of blended in with the mat. We were given them at the start of the event, so obviously they're unpainted, and on this black mat I just forgot it was there, so I didn't move it. So, that's why it's just hanging out there. So in my opponent's next turn, the Flying Overmaster comes down and lands here, out of the view of my Titans, but my Gargoyles could of course charge him. And they are pushing up a bit, but not hugely. Gargoyles get wavered from a bit of shooting. And yes, that's going to be the end of turn 2. Still uneventful. We've got a solid line here and lots of very fast potential flanking units that I don't want to flank me, so I'm just holding the centre and waiting to see if we have a fight. I would be happy with a draw in this game, and looking at the two lists I thought this is going to be a bit tricky because it's got all the things I worry about, all the ways to lower my defence with its crushing strength and thunderous charge and the speed and the ability to get flanks, because there's some, like the individual, not quite individuals, but the single death engines, 3 of them, one of them is very powerful, and they can do quite a bit of multi-charging, so you can get probably all 3 of them into any of my QC units. So I'd be quite happy if I got out of the game with a draw, just from looking at the lists beforehand. The scenario is generally one I would like dominate, because I just want to sit this big wall of rocks in the middle, but on this occasion the enemy actually has more unit strength than I do, and they've got some good chaff units. So if I can shoot down their chaff, when they make a burst to get in the middle, I can then start charging them. But if I can't shoot down the chaff in time, then they're going to be able to block me. Also, games like this in the past, going into this tournament, I changed my mindset a bit, because what I normally do, when there's a bit of a stare down and it's 3 turns in and no one's done any fighting, I tend to think, you know what, this isn't going to make a very interesting report or an interesting game, I'm just going to start a fight and charge in, even if the odds are slightly against me, and see what happens. Which isn't necessarily the best tactical move, so going into this event, I thought, you know what, if I get into a bit of a stalemate, I'm going to stand off unless it's very, very favourable to me. That's what a lot of the top players do. They're not just going to throw things in because it's fun or because they think it'll be entertaining. They're going to stand off until they're presented with something that makes it worth it for them to throw in. So I'm just going to stand off and see what happens for now. And if I just swarm out there now, I'll kill some chaff, and then I'll probably lose some expensive units, and I'll be giving away kill point differential and tournament points, basically. So, turn 3. For me, we can see that my special character has charged the Overmaster and done some wounds. The enemy Overmaster with the Honey Maze wings. I've moved my Ancient Winged Half-Breed away from these enemy units. They can't be charged. The Hellfane is staying there so it can continue shooting the chaff. But I've positioned my big dragon so that it can look over this area. So if anything charges the Hellfane, you would hope they wouldn't kill it in one round, and then I can flank charge it. So that might deter them from trying. And I just compact everything in the middle here. I'm keeping a solid line there, so I'm not giving up any flanks. Turn 3 for my opponent. So, I don't kill the Honey Maze Overmaster, so he goes into my Gargoyles. And there's a bit of rearranging in the middle. We'll see. What's that? A finger pointing at the Hellfane. Oh, it was pointing at him. So the Gargoyles are dead. And, yeah, so more staring. Still not much going on. They've edged this way a bit, trying to look for this flank into my Greater Obsidian Golem. And going into my turn 4. So I chase after him again with the special character and waver him this time. And I managed to shoot down the chaff now with the Hellfane. But I've only killed 1 chaff unit, so that's not really enough. I've repositioned these units a bit again, I think. Let me go back and see where he is. So I've moved the whole line this way a bit, so I'm not giving up flanks. The whole line edges down this way. So still looking very solid, and not much going on. But in enemy turn 4, so double charge on the Hellfane. So which units was it? It was that one and that one into the Hellfane. So they obviously think they've got a chance. I think they've come down off the hill, which maybe is why they feel good about it, because they're going to get extra thunderous from that. So, on average, I don't know how much they should do to a Hellfane, but it is dash 18, and it's inspired, so it should be tricky still. So, you can see that the enemy special character lands here, so it's using Cloak of Death on all these nearby units, which could be important. The wavered Overmaster just runs away down there. I think we've just had the first like on the video, so feel free to keep those rolling in. And the comments, by the way. If you spot anything of interest, or if you just want to announce your arrival, feel free to do so. Well, the Hellfane is dead. It took 15 damage from that lot. So, I think this unit, I think they rolled very, very well. I think the Death Engine went first and didn't do very well. And then this unit went, and then they converted almost all of their wound rolls. And I think it was on a 4, was it? To wound the Hellfane, possibly? Could have been 4 or a 3. But they converted pretty much all of them into wounds, and then managed to kill him. So, that's interesting. So it means I'm probably not going to throw my flyer in there, because I'm not going to kill them in one round. And then they'll countercharge, and I'll get flank charged by this chariot, and then probably die, and then be stuck there. We've got Dicey Guy. Hello there. And yeah, it's the way the event is scored with the kill differential. There's no point me attacking a unit knowing I'm probably going to die. So I might as well just hide with this flying out and not bother trying to fight this lot. The middle is where I'm most interested in. We've got one of the chaff units has moved up in front of my golems there to keep them penned in. So into turn 5, yes, in my turn 5, my flyer just goes over there, out of everyone's line of sight, just wants to hide and not die. So it's kind of gone a little bit wrong. If they didn't kill the Hellfane, that unit would have got flanked and undoubtedly murdered, which would have changed things, obviously. But the best thing for him to do now is hide and not die based on the scoring system. You can also see that I have moved out because I want to get everyone in the scoring area. So I've offered up a flank charge onto my golem there. I think I've offered it to this unit. But I do cast Scorched Earth on them, I believe. Or I cast it on one of the units around there. And I think it is them because I can see them over my own unit there. So I'm offering up the flank here to maybe a unit with Scorched Earth on them so they wouldn't kill him. And yeah, you can see my Hexcaster is there. So he's able to hide behind golems and cast weakness onto Death Engines. So I think he's casting weakness onto this Death Engine. I've flown my gargoyles over the top here to stop this unit joining in because I have a feeling we could be about to see some combat. So on the one hand, I'm offering something that's vaguely tempting there, but I'm also mitigating how much stuff can go in and how effective it will be when it goes in. So I'm hoping that my opponent chooses to throw everything into combat now, because I've worked it out at this point, and my opponent actually has more unit strength around here than I do. So I've got... the gargoyles are going to die, so I'm not going to count them. So we've got 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15. My opponent is going to be able to get into the zone with 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I think there's another point in there somewhere I've missed. But also these guys, there's a Death Engine there that can easily get in before the end of the game. And I can't go out and kill this chaff. For one, if I charge it, there's no guarantee I'll actually kill it, because they don't have that many attacks, and then I get flank charged by a Death Engine and die. If I kill them and then I fall back, I leave the flank of this unit open. If I go backwards too far, and if I don't go back far enough, I leave their flank open. If I turn to face that way, I leave flanks and rears open to units over here. So I can't afford to go and kill that unit and then die, because it's just not a good trade. So, not a lot of action in the game, but it is interesting. Turn 5 for my opponent, you can see some human hands in action there. You can see that the Vermintide aren't interested in going into fight, they're just blockading. I think my opponent has also worked out he's going to be able to get more unit strength in the middle than I do. Now, had the gargoyles not positioned themselves here, would my opponent have attacked? Because I could have had one extra bit of unit strength at the back. I don't know if actually I would have been able to get them in range. So, actually it's here. So I probably could have took them in here, which would have given me another point in there. It's still not enough if my opponent brings the units from over there, though. So I kind of have to be a little bit active, unfortunately, if I want to win the scenario. We are both going to score big if it stays like this, because barely anything's died, so we're both going to get like an average number of kill differential points, because there's not much difference between us. We're both going to score 5 for the scenario, because we've both got at least 5 unit strength in there, and it caps at 5 victory points. So, yeah, I'm probably going to lose the scenario looking at it, but I'm going to score some decent points. And that's why the fly is hiding. So it does take a point of damage from something, but it's not bothered about that. And the Overmaster with the wings charges the Grotesques, just to keep them honest, which I don't recommend. I'm not. If obviously you could kill them over a couple of rounds if you get lucky. I don't think he's going to do it. I think all he's going to do is get himself killed, and that's just going to give me more points. So I don't necessarily agree with that move. And yeah, you can see it's taken damage though, the unit. Actually, yeah, because he's only got 5 attacks. They must have already been damaged. So, yeah, there's not much action, and we're going into turn 6 now. So at this point, I realise, what do I want to do here? So, you can see a little bit of this situation we've got going on here. These units, there's a unit there as well, I think. Let's go back, see if we can have a look properly at that side. Okay, this unit, they both have flanks on the greater elemental. At least one of them wouldn't be hindered when they got there, probably. I can't really... Can I get in a position to scorch earth on it? Maybe, but not both. And there are options as well. These guys could double charge with that unit, which would mean that they could take the bit of the wall and then they would charge unhindered. And if I scorch earth them, then this unit could go into the flank instead. So it's not a great position and I'm not happy with it. So what I'm going to do, because I'm already going to lose on unit strength, because the gargoyles are going to die at some point. Let's see, Dice Guy says, wait, do Kings of War use a chess clock? Yes. For this event we had 70 minutes each to do our moves, which is extremely generous. I think that was too much time, and I think for this point level 1 hour would have been very... That would have been slightly generous as well, but that would have been fair, I think, an hour. But we had 70 minutes, so no one was really going to time out. So, what I'm going to do is charge my Immortal Guard into that chaff unit. And then I'm going to try and position the Immortal Guard to protect this flank, because I'm already going to lose the scenario. So them dying isn't going to affect that. However, they are way less points than him. So I'm trying to preserve the score differential and keep it in my favour. Now, what else could I have done in this situation? If I had, for instance, backed everything away, then some of these units go out the scoring zone. So at the moment I would still be scoring 5. But if they were to charge in and kill anything, that could potentially dip me below 5 if I back away. So that would directly affect my tournament point score, which obviously I don't want. So I don't want to back up here. And I also want to force my opponent to keep things in there. And in turn 6, I don't know if they can really risk charging in, because if there's a turn 7, they would then get murdered. And they're in a winning position, so I don't think they need to, but I can't afford to kill the chaff because I'd be opening up flanks on my units. So I'm going to charge in there. So let's go forward, turn 6. So the grotesques kill, well, they regenerate and get healed, and then they kill the Overmaster, which is cool, gets me some more points. I kill the chaff unit, and I reposition a bit. I think I overrun because I want to box this unit in so they can't fight. And I think I kind of do that, but this unit is going to sacrifice itself to do that. More so because I've now opened up line of sight to this death engine, so if it rolls high on its wild charge, it can actually join in as well. So, on to turn 6 for the enemy, and I think my special event hero charged into these guys just to pin them down, and then it gets charged by all and sundry. So the death engine does roll high enough on its wild charge, so this unit's going to die. But, like I said, I felt like it was an acceptable trade to keep this guy safe. So the doggos, well, they are doggo models, but they're actually vermintide. They're just spreading out a bit, and other units are just getting into the centre zone. So not much damage done, but that unit is killed. And is the game going to end there? Well, my special character is dead. If the game ends there, I lose, but we do get a turn 7. So, what can I accomplish? Again, probably not much. There are only certain things I can kill. And I probably don't want to kill the chaff again because they're kind of stuck. So in turn 7, I actually have the choice of charging this guy into something over here, which is actually facing me, unfortunately. So I don't have a rear charge I can take because I can't see that unit because that's woods. We've just taken the trees off it. We can't see that unit. If I could rear charge that unit, that would have been the choice, but can't see it. Don't want to charge this thing in the front because all I'm doing is risking me being killed because I'm probably not going to kill it. So it's just going to fly away, survive the game. I've accepted the loss at this point. I'm just trying to maximise my points. So, what do I do? You can see there's a Titan base there, so there were things that were being worked out. But I decide I'm actually not going to hit any of the chaff. I'm just going to leave them there because they're meaning that less enemy units are going to be able to charge me in the final turn. So they do throw everything in now because it's going to be the end of the game, see if they can kill something. And they do some damage. Let's see when we get to combat whether they do anything useful. They get everyone into the scoring area, do some damage, but don't kill anything. So at the end of the game, it was close, so I think the final score, with all things considered, it was a loss, but it was about 25-17, something like that. So I got quite a good number of points because we were very close on kill points, because not much died. And I scored 5 victory points as well. My opponent also did. So, I think, planning that out differently, if I'd done the maths a bit earlier in the game, and figured out that I definitely was not going to win the scenario, would I have done things differently? I don't know, because it's only game 2 of a 5-game tournament. And I managed to score quite well in this game, and I thought that was a good result against an army that concerned me just from looking at the list. It had a lot of the tools that I think are required if you want to beat my army. So those were speed, thunderous charge and crushing strength, and hard-hitting units with narrow frontages so you can do multi-charges into my powerful, sometimes small, defense units. So, not too dissatisfied with that. I'll take that and move on into the next round. So, round 3 against the Brother Mark. So, there are 2 legions of essentially peasants. The crummiest troops that the world has to offer. You would think but they actually have crushing strength on them. So, they are defense 3, they're a legion, 24, 27, but they do have a rallying ability in there somewhere that's going to boost that up to a maximum of 2. So there is some rallying on some of the heroes later on. So 2 legions that are going to be very tough to crack despite the incredibly low defense. 2 men-at-arms spearmen regiment with phalanx. So I'm going to have to not send my flyers into those. Got some Oathsworn Guardians, so a regiment of those. They are infantry with some crushing strength. And Duelists, so they're like individual hunting infantry. Order of the Abyssal Hunt, 2 cavalry regiments. 16 attacks hitting on 3s. This one hits on 2s, in fact, with the Brew of Sharpness. And the other one has the Boots of Striding. So, expensive cavalry, but quite potent. Then there are some skirmishers, a small cavalry unit. A bit more expensive than chaff, but they actually do a job as well. They're fast, and they have some thunderous charge. They're nimble, so pretty good. Similar to like a goblin fleabag unit. There is a Phoenix, which is a flyer with not many attacks, but it does have heal. Heal 5, and does it also have, let's see, crushing strength 1, regeneration 4+. Yeah, so it's got fire bolts. Is it called fire sparks with this unit? Yeah, so it's a decent shooting attack, and it's for healing, and if you can give it a flank or a rear charge it might do something, but in general just 3 attacks, so it's not that amazing, but it's not too expensive either. There's a paladin, who is an infantry hero, who has crushing strength, he's got elite, he's headstrong, individual, inspiring. There's some iron resolve going on in this army. So iron resolve on the Order of the Abyssal Hunt cavalry, iron resolve here. There's some rallying there. There's an exemplar champion with the Sacred Horn and Veil of Shadows, which grants stealthy to nearby units, but I think you can only cast it once per game. It's not going to be a big deal against my army. Is it? Can you cast it once per game? No, I think it might be you can only take it once in your list. And then special rules, crushing strength, some more rallying here. There's a wizard with heal and lightning bolt, and there's rallying on the High Chaplain as well, High Chaplain Augustus, who also has heal, and a High Paladin on Dragon there to round it out. So it's a dragon that is not too dissimilar to mine, but it's got 1 extra attack and it's got a shooting attack. It's headstrong. Yeah, iron resolve all over the place in this list. Iron resolve and heal, so it's going to be tough to bring these units down, but the same can be said about my army. So, it is plunder. So we've got 5 objectives across the middle of the table, and you can pick them up. So what does that mean? It means spreading out. So it doesn't always mean that. So what you can do is, of course, you can just set up your whole army going for 3 objectives, but the enemy do have some fast units. They've got knights, they've got 2 big flyers, one of whom is a full-on dragon, so that's actually quite dangerous. So I don't want to be needlessly giving up flanks by setting up my whole army in a corner. Because it's possible, because you can set up your whole army over here and then just put something dangerous here like your own big flyer, and then the enemy might be hesitant to come and try and flank you. But it's still going to be difficult because there's terrain here and there's woods around, so it can potentially hide from your flyer while also threatening flanks. So it's not a great setup for that. I decided I'm just going to spread out, but you can see I've definitely not committed to this end because I've only got Immortal Guard here. At this end, I have got faster units. You'll notice this side of the table I've got my 3 fastest units apart from the gargoyles. So obviously I'm more concerned about the centre here. I've got all my big, tough rock units, all 5 of them, staring at these 3 objectives. And the fact that you can score bonus tournament points for victory points means you don't want to just get a narrow win. If possible, you want to get all 5 of those objectives. So, nice cinematic shot there over the shoulder of my troops. So I've kept my flyers behind other units. And I've got my spellcasters hiding as well. They don't want to get shot by lightning bolts. The enemy have got knights and the phoenix on this side. They've got the two big peasant legions in the middle with knights for backup. They've got some infantry, some the light cavalry and the big flyer over there. So let's do this into turn 1, and I immediately start moving up, and I want to get on these tokens because yeah, my opponent's already moved by this point, so my opponent went first. Did I actually take a picture of the turn dice? Don't think I did. So not much happened, but my opponent starts moving up towards the tokens. So the reason the gargoyles are positioned this way, if I go first, what they can actually do is move forwards, pivot, and the corner of their base just needs to touch the token, and then they can pick it up, and they're facing sideways. If the enemy are then able to charge them in the flank, I've hopefully moved units all the way up to about here, so any unit they hit the gargoyles with can then be hit back. And if they don't have the speed to hit the gargoyles, I can then, in the next turn round with them and start running away this way with them. And run away with the objectives. So it's a bit risky, would be a bit risky in this particular game because there's lightning bolt out there. So I might not risk that even if I did go first, because they could just get lightning bolted off. But if you're against a full combat army, if you can jump straight onto the objective with a chaff unit and threaten to run away, they may have to attack you to stop the objectives going away from them. Okay, and oh yeah, and you don't just want to fly 20 and then land on it and face straight forwards. You want to maximise your distance from the enemy, so you fly up to about here, then turn 90 degrees one way or the other, so just the edge of your base is touching it, pick up the objective, and you're positioned like that, if you end up in that situation. So my turn, I just push up, I keep... Okay, so what I've done here, I've got my grotesques behind the gargoyles. Now, the grotesques are wider than the gargoyles, so I can't fully protect them, but I've pushed them right up to the edge of the grotesques there. So if the enemy knights or the flyer want to charge the grotesques, any one of the units is going to be able to fit. If I had the gargoyles in the middle, and there was a gap on both sides, then they could both fly in, one at each side. This one flying in, this one just charging in. So I'm just giving them the opportunity to charge one of the units into the grotesques if they want. And they're probably going to be hindered by that wall as well. I'm also giving them the option to charge my golems, which they're free to take because I've got inspiring round here, I've got really good defense, and I've got backup waiting. So we'll see. Turn 2 for the enemy, because everything else is just an advance, race up towards the objectives, a little bit of surging on a unit that isn't worried about being flank charged. So that's why this unit is slightly further ahead. In the enemy turn 2, the peasants are coming for me. The Peasant Uprising. These are really, really nice models. I can't remember which company he said they came from, but I'll have to find out because they are very, very nice peasants and painted very nicely as well. I feel like this army may have been overlooked in the Best Painted Awards because, just to my eye, I think maybe technically, in terms of pure technical painting, this one might have been the best. But spoiler alert, the one with the light-up moving train mine shaft won Best Painted. And I'm not going to begrudge that because that one is also very nice. But I think, in terms of technical painting quality, this one might have been the nicest, which I thought when I had a closer look at them during the game. So, the knights decide to go in. I do not agree with this decision. The flyer is hanging back there. I think that's kind of a suicidal move, because the knights are undoubtedly going to get killed, and they're probably not going to do much to the golems. So the issue for my opponent here was that I'd pushed my grotesques up fairly close, and if you start backing up, you're backing away from the objective as well, which means I can pick it up and then move my grotesques up here, and you're in the same situation, but I now have the objective. So I can understand taking the initiative and charging in. I just don't think this is how I would have gone about it. I think if you wanted to hit them, you could potentially throw both units in. He would be hindered, but then you're not getting flanked by the Hellfane as a result. And it would also push the knights further down this way, and the dragon's base doesn't come out quite as far, so it would go to about there. So I don't know if the grotesques would be able to see either unit then. I don't know if they can see them as it is. I think you would still be safe from them if you had a square base in here as well. So if you're going to go in, I think they both have to. Otherwise, you're definitely not killing this unit. And you're getting flanked by a Hellfane any minute now. So I think if you really want to charge, I think it has to be a double. We've got Pforson in the chat. Good evening. What have you been playing lately? Because I see you commenting a lot, but I think we played Age of Sigmar, didn't we? And I know you like your Kings of War. Have you been participating in events lately? Okay, moving on. So obviously they're not going to do much. Greater Golem is taking bits of damage. There's little lightning bolts here and there that are plinking damage onto units. So 5 damage onto the golems. So when you see that those guys do 5 damage, you think, actually, the dragon going in as well could have done something there. Could have given me a bit of a fright with a spicy nerve roll, perhaps. But obviously on their own, not going to do much. Just 5. Turn 2 for me. So, okay. It's time to go and eat the peasants. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double charge these 2 golem hordes into this peasant block. So one of them is going to become hindered. I'm then going to charge the gargoyles into this one to tie them up. So they can't go after my flank, I think. Yeah, there we go. So the gargoyles are level with the golems, which means that these peasants cannot charge here. So this could be... Yes, we did play AOS. It was years ago. So what have you been up to? Okay, so in this situation, having a perfectly level front line is often desirable because you're not giving away flanks. However, there is something to be said for a staggered front line as well. And here's a good illustration of it. So, if this unit here were slightly behind the peasants, then what can end up happening, it maybe not the best illustration of it with these particular units, but if this unit was further back, for example, and my golem hordes charged in, then suddenly this unit, as long as you've positioned it sufficiently so that this unit can still see what charges in, so just a slight stagger, then potentially you can look for flank charges then. With this shape of unit, it's not necessarily the easiest. With something that's square, very, very easy. So if you have a square unit that's set slightly further forward than the enemy, then the unit next to it, so a square unit here, and a straight line unit there, straight line, but then this one slightly further ahead. If they charge past you to charge the unit behind, then now, when you look sideways, you can actually impact the flank of the enemy unit. So it's worth considering staggering your front line, sometimes based on your unit shape and the units you're coming up against. Let's see. Forsen says, been playing a lot of Kings of War in Berlin. We mainly play using 10mm half measurements. Heathens! Actually, it sounds pretty cool. So, done some good damage to that peasant horde, started off on them and got those ones locked down. I'm not concerned about being flanked by them, because it's going to be hindered and they're not going to be that scary. Over here, I obviously flank the knights and kill them with the countercharge from the golems and the flank charge from the Hellfane. The gargoyles fly over there and attack the dragon. And I don't think they do any wounds, so it's a good job that I positioned my grotesques like this to keep it in the front. Because I was thinking I could do a wound to the dragon, ground it, and then it'll have to fight the gargoyles for a turn. As it is, it could actually charge the grotesques, so it's a good job I've put it in the front. Could also charge, potentially, the Hellfane, which would be a bad idea. And I've got my flyer to attack the unit at the back there, so let's go back and actually show you that. So there's a little hero poking out the woods there, and my Overmaster on Ancient Winged Halfbreed is able to swoop over the top and charge that guy there, who's poking out the tiniest bit at the back. So that is why he is over there. And he doesn't kill the hero, but I've got myself into a really dangerous position for the enemy. None of them are looking at me. And when I eventually do kill that hero, which shouldn't be many more turns, then I'll be in a really good spot to turn around and threaten the enemy lines. On this side, I've pushed the Immortal Guard up because the Knights can't see them over the hill because they're not tall enough. The Phoenix doesn't want to charge them because it doesn't have enough attacks. And I've got the Greater Golem here kind of inviting a charge if the Knights want to have a go at it. That's fine by me. And let's see what the enemy are going to do about this situation. So, the dragon decides to go after the grotesques in the front, which isn't going to end well. So if we go back here, the Hellfane is going to be able to see the dragon, because it's not going to kill the grotesques in one round, so that's not going to be a good time. What could it do? Fly away, possibly, behind the building. I think you should probably just abandon the situation instead of just throwing yourself into combat, I would say. So, probably not going to end well. I think the Hellfane can see it anyway, but even if it can't, there's golems here as well. The peasants are countercharging. This flank charge is on, so they take that. The infantry regiment, these peasants slide across so they can join in the fight. And by the way, if I'm not mentioning it explicitly each time, then I'm generally weakening and scorched earth casting onto enemy units each turn to make sure that either their charges are going to be hindered or they're going to be -1 to wound me. So if I don't mention it, just assume it's been a cast on a unit that's threatening me. Around here it's not too big of an issue, but the peasants do have crushing strength 1, so it is actually worth casting it on them. I can't always see them, because my own units are quite tall. So, depends where my casters are. So those peasants are going to try and kill the gargoyles. And yeah, so the knights move up onto the hill, inviting the Immortal Guard to come and play, perhaps. And these knights charge through into the Greater Obsidian Golem. And I've just turned it round so, because its fist is too pokey out the front, so it's not actually a rear charge. So, let's see what happens. I think my Ironcaster has Hex cast on him, perhaps. I think that's what that's representing. And a little bit of shooting damage onto... I think that's my special character there. Bit of shooting damage onto my Immortal Guard. And 4 damage on the grotesques, not good enough from the dragon. 1 wound done back onto my flyer, which is kind of annoying from the wizard, actually, because that means that my flyer cannot fly anymore. So I can't just swoop over its head and look at the rear of the enemy army. I have to actually fight him, unfortunately. And 7 damage done to these golems, which is not enough to worry them, and the gargoyles, of course, die. So the peasants... Okay, good move from the peasants. The peasants could just pivot on the spot, or they could stay where they are. Actually, they can't pivot because those guys are in the way. But they elect to slide this way, because if they don't, I think the golems can actually fit into the flank of that unit. So there's a potential flank charge open there if they don't slide. So they do, and I think they get about 2 inches. So, hello Wraith13 in the chat there. I'm alarmed that only one of the viewers has liked the video so far, so I'm assuming people are reserving judgment until they've seen it all the way to the end before deciding if it's earned a like. So, I'll try to be as entertaining as possible. Peasants slide along, so that flank charge is not open anymore. But this unit's almost dead anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. And, okay, so here's an interesting situation, if you're familiar with surging. So, this unit now is in the flank of both of these enemy units. So that means you can't really charge either of them, I think. So there is something in the rules about you can't position your units to deny the enemy the ability to charge. I don't even know if it's in the new rules. I haven't looked it up recently. But often, you kind of have to use common sense in this situation. And yeah, I might actually look in the rulebook at this. Yeah, because there are situations, like you can't... there are situations where you could turn your units at weird angles so that an enemy can't physically fit against any of them. And you can do it using terrain, that's fine, but there is something in the rules that you can't do it purely with your own units. In this situation, there's a way around it though, because when you surge a unit into combat, then whichever facing they connect with, that's the one that they impact, so it wouldn't have to be in the flank. So I could surge them into the front in this situation. So that unit will be able to fight, just to be clear. So the Greater Golem takes 5 wounds, and it's looking very good for me. This dragon's undoubtedly going to get murdered, and it's just all round, it's looking like a pretty smooth sailing operation at the moment. However, you do have to factor in the tokens. Who's got one? There's one here that no one's picked up. There is one here under my golems. There's one there. There is one, these knights have got one, I think. When they went up onto the hill, they picked up a token, and there's another one around here. I think those guys have it. So the enemy is actually holding the tokens right now. Turn 3, so the Immortal Guard charged the knights, and this guy charges into their flank. So it was after this game that I realised that the special version of Host Shadow Beast on this character for this event can be cast on any unit, not just individuals. So rather than charging in, he should have stayed there and cast it on the Immortal Guard, so they could have had a good chance to kill this unit. But, alas, I wasn't aware of that until the end of this game. The Greater Golem goes back into them. These golems end up in the front there, which would have been due to surging into combat to get them there. And these golems finish off the other peasant horde, and then they turn to face this way. And they've got a token that they were standing on as well. So they're staring at this unit, and these golems charged into that unit there, which might have a token, and do some damage, but not enough to kill them. And I put the Hexcaster on the edge of the woods so that the golems wouldn't slide down into difficult terrain and become hindered. So to keep them unhindered, I put the Hexcaster there, which is a lovely trick, which you see quite commonly employed nowadays. The Hellfane and the Grotesques kill the dragon, and the Gargoyles pick up the token on the hill, which is nice. Turn 4 for the enemy, so the peasants back into the golems, not too concerned. And also a wizard goes into them as well, I think. Is that a wizard or is it some other hero? The Phoenix and the Knights decide to go after the Greater Golem this time, so they don't have their Thunderous Charge, but the Phoenix has joined in for an extra 3 attacks. The infantry block here go back into these golems. And yeah, so infantry versus golems, probably going to end well for me. Not enough to kill them. Not enough to kill them. Golem on 10 damage. Not dead. Immortal Guard on 8 damage, not dead. So yeah, don't lose any units there. So that was really the Brotherhood's last chance, I think, to kill some of my units before they get crushed. So let's see how turn 4 goes. So back in on these guys, and the Immortal Guard regenerates some wounds. Crush the Knights. Turn, so the Phoenix is in the front. Okay, so it's all very well saying crush the Knights, but how did I crush the Knights? Let's go back. So this unit, instead of countercharging the peasants, they just change facing to face totally the opposite way, and then get surged into the flank of the Knights. Yep, that is the thing. So turn round on the spot, surge in, dead Knights. Or with this guy in the front as well. So Knight's dead. Because they only hit on 4s, these units, I like to double up on them and get as many attacks as possible to guarantee that a unit dies, rather than spreading their attacks out a lot. Especially because he's taken a lot of wounds already. I don't want to leave too many things alive. If the Phoenix does go in there and finish him off, I could quite easily just turn them round again and surge into the Phoenix. But I wanted to face this way so I don't get rear-charged by the peasants, because that would be 90 attacks, which, even though it might not do much, if it gets slightly lucky, it could do a lot of damage. with that many dice. Killed off one of the infantry regiments with these guys, and the other ones are still embroiled in battle. And pretty much killing everything and just turning to face into the rest of the game now. And you can see it's mostly my units that are alive. The enemy does not have a lot left. Turn 5. So, the Phoenix picks up a token. Or it may have already had it actually, but it's got a token. And this guy charges into the Greater Obsidian Golem. The Phoenix just gets out of the charge arc. And the peasants go back into these golems. And these peasants do have a rear charge on this unit though, because I failed to kill them. So we've got peasants in the rear, quality infantry in the flank, and into the front we've got infantry as well. So there's a bit of a sandwich. Let's see if they get killed and have their token stolen. So this guy does some damage but doesn't kill the Greater Golem. The Immortal Guard get killed. So at this point I'm thinking, if I knew that I could be casting Host Shadow Beast on those Immortal Guard both turns, I maybe could have won this fight, but alas, dead. So, more damage done here, but clinging on to life, because he is dash 19, this guy, so he's really tough to shift. And the golems, look at all that damage, they've taken 14, and they're dead. An extra point of damage, actually. So yeah, they're toast. Peasants turn round, infantry turns round. Who takes... who's got a token here? I can't see it on the base, but someone's got a token, I think. My flyer gets wounded again by a hero, so he can't fly. He's just going to be stuck there, I think. I think so, anyway. I think he gets wounded. So it's still looking good for me, but I've got this to deal with. I've got these 3 units. So I'm going to have to charge into them. Turn 5. So back into the knights, trying to kill them. And I've got rid of some of the infantry. So we look here. The big peasant blob. I have... Hold on, what do I go for here? I think I killed the Phoenix with these guys. I think I surged them into the flank of the Phoenix to kill it, and the Golem killed the hero that charged it, or is still fighting it anyway. I think it's still alive, actually. So I killed the Phoenix. That hero is still alive. I mop up one of the infantry blobs here with the Hellfane and the Golems, and my flyer kills the hero and overruns, so this unit is now in peril. And I've brought my grotesques over. The gargoyles are carrying the token with them there. So it's still looking good. Still looking very good. Turn 6. And the enemy, so we've got the hero and the peasants into these golems. They should be fine. And yeah, not much happens in that turn. This flyer gets charged by him. Now, this isn't going to prevent him charging, because he's going to be able to pivot. He is a flyer as well. I think he gets wounded, but I think even so, he can still pivot and touch that unit with the corner of his base. Which means that he can then pick up and place in that spot there, because the width of that unit is the same width as his base, or it's bigger. So he will be able to fit in there, because they actually charge into the Hellfane. So let's keep it rolling. So my turn 6, kill the peasants, attack from all sides, kill that unit, and holding on to tokens with them, they steal one off the peasants, I think. Gargoyles have got one that was here. The grotesques have got one there. The enemy have got one on the knights. I think I hold the other 4 though. Can't see who's got the 4th one. Would be one of these 2, maybe the Hellfane. But regardless, managed to kill a lot of stuff, didn't lose that much stuff, and I think I'm going to sneeze, so I'll mute the microphone. Okay then, we're back after the sneeze. So that went swimmingly. A nice win there. Quite a wide margin, because I killed almost everything. There was only some knights and a couple of foot heroes left, I think. So it wasn't quite maximum points, but it was good. Next round, we're on to day 2 And at the moment I'm tied in first place in the table. So going into round 4, we're against dwarves. So another dwarf list, different from the earlier one. We've got some Iron Guard regiment. There's a lot of throwing mastiffs in this list. So 2 Iron Guard regiments with throwing mastiffs, 1 has fire oil. 2 Shield Breaker regiments with throwing mastiffs, 3 Mastiff hunting packs with throwing mastiffs, 2 Battle Drillers. So Battle Drillers are interesting because they have Brutal 2, they have a lot of attacks, they have Crushing Strength. 2 Stone Priests, 1 with Bane Chant, 1 with Bane Chant and Scorched Earth. And they also have Radiance of Life. There's a Dwarf Lord with Wings of Honeymaze, Faber Ironheart, who we saw earlier as well, and a Dwarf Lord on Large Beast as well, with Blade of Slashing. And then there's a formation with... all these units also have throwing mastiffs. We have 2 Phalanx regiments and a Horde with the Brew of Strength. Okay, there's also the Lord's Bannerman Standard Bearer, who has Aura Elite Infantry only, which is pretty much everybody. So lots of elite going round. So it's a very slow army, but it's also very tough, hits quite hard, and it throws a lot of dogs. So if all those dogs are able to target one of my units, it could quite possibly kill one of them. So, got to be wary of that. I don't want to position one of my units in position of too many dogs. I think I've already moved by the time I've taken this picture, by the way, so I've gone first. And the scenario is push. So you can see there are 2 push tokens on this unit out in the corner there, and I've got 2 push tokens on the Immortal Guard, because they're the only unit I've got that won't suffer any ill effects from carrying tokens. They don't get slower because they're already speed 4, and they can't be surged anyway, so they wouldn't lose out on that by holding on to tokens. There's 1 in the middle, which is why the Hellfane is going straight for it. The Hellfane's a good choice to carry tokens. It's got high nerve, and it's not shambling. So it does get slowed down a bit while holding a token, but I'm not too worried about that. It's only slowing down by 1, and I've got other units nearby to pass the token off to as well. Just gone for a big blob. Don't have to worry about being flanked, because there's really nothing apart from Mastiff hunting packs that's got any speed. So just a big compact block. So, moving forward, the enemy have covered this side of the table with these 2 units, who aren't going to participate too much probably. They're probably just going to wander off and get the objectives into my half, which I'm okay with. And in the middle, Battle Drillers, quite scary. I'm kind of worried about them. It's the Brutal 2 that does it. Because Brutal 2 against a Legion of Zombies isn't that scary. Brutal 2 against a Defense 6 unit. It's brutal whether you're Defense 6 or 3. Or 2. So, still pretty scary. I think this is the same mat I've got. The same lava mat. You might have seen it in some of my old battle reports. Okay, so the enemy turn, they throw a few mastiffs, I think, at the dragon. And all these units have got throwing mastiffs, but they haven't been unleashed yet. They're waiting for the right time. Faber Ironheart there, hanging out behind the mastiffs, behind this wall, with the Lord, with the Wings of Honeymaze there. So they can't really envelop around me too much unless they want to push in from this side and not carry the objective into my half, which you want to do in the push scenario because then it's worth double. Although curiously, in tournament point scoring, you only get 1 point for each token that you carry into the enemy half. So for winning the game, it's worth 2, but for bonus tournament points, each objective is only worth 1, wherever you're holding it. So, interesting. So, a little bit of damage done to my flyer, but not much, and 1 damage done to the Hexcaster as well. So, yeah, not much going on yet. Turn 2 for me. So, pushing forwards, Grotesques onto the hill. If the enemy want to come in and get hit by Grotesques with extra Thunderous Charge, that's fine by me, but they probably won't because I've got quite a decent defensive position there. The Immortal Guard realise there's barely anything on that side of the table, so they're going to start going that way and just score over there with the 2 objectives, and then I'll get the middle one. And if I start fighting in the enemy half, I should be able to hold on to it. I think I'm probably going to win the showdown between the 2 armies in the middle, to my estimation. So my big flyer charges into some mastiffs, because there wasn't much around to threaten him if he does so. Doesn't quite kill them though. The Hellfane is doing a bit of shooting, I think, and picks up the token there. So Hellfane's got the token, I've got my big wall of golems up there, nothing really threatening their flanks. The Mastiffs probably don't want to do a hindered charge into the golem if they can even reach, I don't know if they can. And Gargoyle's just hanging back, they don't want to get shot. So my flyer is in a dangerous position. If he'd killed that unit, then it would have been an incredibly good position, because he could have just spun round and looked down the enemy lines. Now, let's see, which armies have I come across the Aura of Fury in effect yet on the enemy special character? Okay, so my Hexcaster, who is, where is he? He might be around here. I think he's there. So, gets a line of sight on the enemy special character and hexes the enemy special character. The enemy special character has Aura of Fury. So, these doggos got wavered, I think. So, and they don't have Headstrong. So, if they want to countercharge my flyer and stop me flying over them next turn and flanking something, this guy will have to come over here and issue his Aura of Headstrong on Aura of Fury, not Headstrong, onto them, so they can then countercharge. However, it would have to move to do that. And because it's hexed, it can't move and cast a spell, so it can't move and then cast Host Shadow Beast on them, which, as I mentioned, is a special version of Host Shadow Beast for this specific event character, which can be cast on any unit, not just individuals. So, if it wants to cast Host Shadow Beast, it would have to stay where it is, which means that they can't countercharge because they don't have Fury yet. So it's going to move over here to let them countercharge, but then it can't buff them with the spell because he's hexed. And you're not allowed to move while spellcasting when you're hexed. So, I'm quite happy with the way this is looking, feeling fairly confident. Not too many threats are emerging. And on to the next turn. So the Dwarf Lord, he initially landed there, and then I pointed out, actually, you've moved at the double, so you can't land in difficult terrain with a flyer, so you'll have to go over here. So he just moves it there. And these guys do countercharge, because my opponent thought, you know what, I'll just try and do 1 damage with the normal attacks and stop you flying. It's very possible. And moves him over here to get that off. And the other dogs move out, and they start lobbing their throwing Mastiffs at the Hellfane, get it up to 11 damage with all these throwing dogs, and kill it. Yeah. So, very powerful throwing dogs, but most of them have been used now. But the Hellfane is dead, so that is a surprising turn of events. 1 damage is done to my flyer, which means I can't now fly off and flank anybody, so I'm going to have to stay fighting this unit. Turn 3 for me. So, I land my gargoyles here to stop the king from attacking anyone, or the Dwarf Lord. And I put my special event character into him. The gargoyles couldn't charge because they were facing the wrong way, so they're just blocking his line of sight. And my golems, actually let's wind back so you can see where those golems are. Here, this unit flank charges these doggos and kills them, which is this shot here, so they're dead. And then I make sure everyone's in the front, so they can't get flank charged. Over here, I throw some gargoyles into the Mastiffs on the hill. And you'll notice my 2 big titans there. So what was in that position? So, let's go back. Where can I actually see them? So here. Okay. There is a king on large beast right there. What I do is, I push my golem, because he can't see him. I move him into the woods and turn him sideways so he can be in line with the king, and then I surge him with my Ironcaster into the flank of the king on large beast right here, so he lands about there. So the flyer kills them, and my greater obsidian golem kills the king on large beast. So 2 good kills there, 2 titans staring down the flank of the enemy army now. So that is very scary for them. And I've tied up those Mastiffs, because on the hill, charging off the hill, my Immortal Guard with the tokens want to come in this direction, which are here, so I've started moving them up to get them across the centre line. But I don't want to get charged by the Mastiffs while they're on the hill, ideally, because they're going to have extra Thunderous Charge, and they could get very, very lucky and kill my unit that has the tokens, and then I would have nothing on this side that could easily go and pick it up that I don't need elsewhere. So, ideally, I wouldn't like them to take that. On to my opponent's turn 3, and it's looking healthy despite the lack of Hellfane. I have picked up the token that the Hellfane was carrying with my Grotesques now. And there aren't many throwing doggos left. So they're going to have to charge now. So there's a Horde and Faber Ironheart into the Golems on the left there. The King countercharges my Gargoyles. Oh, it's not really countercharge. I think he just charges them freshly because he thinks they're more important to get rid of and actually worth points, unlike the event special character. So this unit with the 2 tokens is pushing up down here, so I'm just not bothering about them. I'm just going to try and have the other 3 tokens at the end of the game. And yeah, the Dwarfs can't accomplish too many charges this turn. The Mastiffs are going to be countercharging the Gargoyles, of course. And my Gargoyles die, and the other Gargoyles die. So we're out of Gargoyles. The Mastiffs go backwards. So I'm kind of in the same situation I just was. But it also means that if somehow I got stuck in a ridiculous stalemate, it's going to be happening further forward on the table instead of on the centre line. So they're more likely to score me those points by getting over the halfway line. And that Golem Horde is dead. So 10 wounds from the Horde and Faber Ironheart is enough to kill them. So we've lost another unit. It makes it interesting. I'm still confident because I've got my 2 big units here ready to come in, my 2 Titans, and I've got 3 very powerful units here. But all in all, it's looking quite good so far, but I could have done without those losses. Turn 4 for me. So Mr. Ironheart is facing this way. So he's not a threat. So I put the Grotesques and these Golems into the front of this Horde. I put the Flyer into the flank of the Horde. So really going all in, trying to get rid of that Horde in one go, and obviously it works. Then my Flyer turns to face this regiment, so everyone is looking that way. And he's looking over there, so he's not a threat at the moment. So you can see he flew from all the way over there. He couldn't actually see them until this guy got out of the way. And what this guy does is this unit here is presenting a flank to him, and there's just enough space for him to fit into their flank there. So he's going to flank charge this unit, which gets him out the way, which means the Flyer can then see the Horde. So over here, flank charged that unit and killed them, and then turned around to face the other unit, and these Golems have moved up as well. So very fruitful turn, killed some good units, and these guys actually decide that they don't want to get charged next turn. They want to face that unit for less turns, so they actually don't move in very far at all. They may actually move backwards. So I'm still confident they'll get into the other half to win, to score the points, but I don't want to get hit by them yet, just in case. I also don't want to be all the way over here and then get unlucky and die and not have any units nearby. So if they want to charge me, if they want to come down and then charge me, I've got units that are much closer to this spot. So I'm being a little bit cagey there, maybe unnecessarily. But there aren't that many dwarf units left that are a threat now. These ones are too far away, and that unit isn't going to join in because they want to score the 2 points. Or the 4 points for getting into my half, should I say. So the Grotesques have got a token as well there. So still feeling good about it. The enemy king is lingering down here, which is a bit of a threat. So he flies over here to make this unit think twice about staying here, because they don't want to get hit by Mastiffs and a king. That could actually kill them. So they're actually going to start having to move away to avoid him now. So, my Flyer gets hit by the regiment in the front and the 2 battle drillers in the flank. And a throwing dog does 2 damage to my event special character. The Grotesques take a throwing dog to the face, I think, from this unit as well. And then these 2 regiments go into the Greater Golem and do some damage. My big Flyer is wavered, which is okay because I'm kind of playing the delaying game now because I'm holding the tokens, so I'm in a winning position. And him surviving where I can bring wounds back with regeneration and healing, potentially. Not too bad. But it does stop the grotesques from participating, because there's no one they can really charge now, because they're kind of jammed in behind him. Turn 5. So, this guy is going to be firing off lightning bolts at that unit. The golems over on this side charge into Faber Ironheart, who was now a threat, because he's facing my important units. My flyer gets back to 2 wounds, as a result of the healing and the regeneration, and the grotesques just shuffle this way behind him a bit, because they want to make sure the token is fully in the enemy half. And Greater Golem into this regiment, Golem Horde into that regiment, and my Hexcaster, I think I Hex, or I think I put weakness on the dogs on the hill actually. I don't think I'd use Hex on him, because in his position he wouldn't have to actually move to cast Host Shadow Beast on the dogs. So I think I Hex the dogs on the hill, and then I use him to heal the Greater Golem, I think. Let me see, how many wounds was the Greater Golem on? 6, yeah. So I get some of his wounds back with heal, with the Shroud, and then he weakens the doggos on the hill. So they're going to have a hard time killing them. But they will be able to have Host Shadow Beast cast on them, potentially. 5 for the dwarves. So the doggos go in. It's their last chance to try and kill this unit, pretty much, before I kill them and then march into the corner to hide forever. And countercharges galore. Faber and this regiment, who were bodyguarding the token-carrying unit, but they've now come back into the centre, so they double charge into these golems. And everyone back into the dragon again, who's down to 2 wounds from the healing and regeneration. And the Dwarf Lord attacks one of my Ironcasters. And these guys are closing the distance on my event special character with their 2 tokens. And let's see how the damage shakes out. So barely anything done to them. And quite a bit of damage done to the Greater Golem there. Doesn't die, but the Golem Horde does die. So that's not great. And the Flyer dies as well. Look at all that damage. The Battle Drillers actually did a really good job here. So it's the Brutal 2 as well that does it. So suddenly it's looking very interesting, because I had a little bit of a mediocre round of not killing things, and now the enemy with a bit of an overrun there. So they don't manage to kill that horde. So it's still looking okay, but it's actually starting to get a bit dicey now, because we're holding 2 tokens each that are clearly going to be scored from being in the enemy half, and then the grotesques are holding 1 as well. So at the moment I'm winning, but they have to live. So what I'm going to do now, I don't have enough units to do what I would like to do, because too many of them have died. So the grotesques are going to have to hope they kill this unit, and then they can spin round and not get charged in the flank by that unit. The golems are going to stay here and fight and try and take out some of these units and just stop them joining in. The Immortal Guard are just going to kill the doggos and then run off and score points. And I'm going to have to use my spellcasters to make it unlikely that the enemy will kill the grotesques by weakening them, and can't Scorch Earth because he's been wounded by the Lord. So I can weaken them with the Hexcaster though. So, on to turn 6. So for me, I countercharge into the Dwarf Regiment, and I try to cast Host Shadow Beast on them with my event special character down here, because I can't reach to put it on the grotesques. But I failed to cast it. The grotesques are in there, but they're not doing... I can't really read the damage counters on the photos, which is unfortunate, but they do some damage. However, look at this spicy situation. So, you will notice that, let's see, both these units are dead. How did that happen, you might ask? Well, the Greater Golem finished off this unit. This unit, I cast Weakness on them, and it did damage to them, because the Hexcaster's Weakness does damage as well with Piercing 1. And as a result, that unit was killed. So they'd already taken some damage, but both those units die, so suddenly it's gone from looking a bit dicey to looking very, very rosy all of a sudden. Can't kill that unit though, so it's still not guaranteed, and the Battle Drillers are in play, so they are obviously a big danger. So I kill the doggos and then overrun just an inch, but nothing's going to stop them scoring. So they're going to score, they're going to score. So it's all about this one token in the middle that's currently on the grotesques, but you will have noticed that they have dropped the token. So my thought was, because this unit probably wasn't going to get killed by my weakness casting, I was probably going to get hit in the flank. So I dropped the token, knowing that the enemy would have to kill my unit and then overrun far enough with this unit, which is probably about 4 inches. So a 50-50 chance, probably, of not picking up the token. So I was willing to take those odds. And then if I don't die at the end of turn 6, the token is just chilling there and I'll accept a draw. But I don't want to risk dying while holding the token, because then they can just steal it off me without the extra dice roll. So that would turn it into a loss. So I'm basically accepting a draw if the game ends in turn 6 by doing that. So turn 6 for the enemy. Double charge again here with Faber and the regiment into the Golem Horde, the 2 battle drillers and this regiment into the grotesques, who have dropped it, and the Lord into the rear as well, so there's a really good chance they could die. And yeah, those units up there are dead, those dwarves. That's just a dead pile, so ignore them. 12 damage and a waver, but they have Dwarven Ale. So, whew, they survive, but are we going to get a turn 7, or is it just going to be a draw? These guys don't die either. We get a turn 7. So, these guys go back into that unit. The grotesques, let's see what they do. Okay, so my golems kill off that regiment in turn 7. The grotesques kill the unit they were fighting, and they get down to 3 wounds. So they regenerated a ton of their wounds, and then I put all my healing abilities into them with both of my healing casters and got them down to 3. So the 2 battle drillers and the dwarf lord would have to kill them and make them drop the token, and then obviously none of them are capable of carrying a token, so they could just turn it into a draw. And the enemy event special character is fighting my greater golem, because I charged into it, but I just wanted to damage it so it couldn't cast Host Shadow Beast on anything in the last turn. And my Immortal Guard are just running off even further with the tokens past this dead pile. So it's going to be turn 7 for the enemy. And Faye Ironheart's going to try and finish them, and they're going to try and finish the grotesques. And in they go. So Faber doesn't manage to kill them, and the grotesques don't die either. So I'm holding 3 tokens in the enemy half. My opponent is holding 2 tokens in my half, so that is a win. And it's quite a good win points-wise, because I've got some expensive units left, but it's not a massive win points-wise. It's decent, I would say. I've got some, I think pretty much all my heroes are intact. So that's a decent chunk of points there. I've got my 3 spellcasters. I've got a Titan left and 2 big hordes. I've got my Immortal Guard left. Pretty decent. My opponent has got some individuals and 1 unit and Faber Ironheart. So I've definitely got more left alive, but it's not a massive win by any means. It's enough though to put me onto the top table in the last round with a 3-point lead. So you may notice that this list looks familiar. It's the same Ratkin Slave list that I played in that kind of non-game earlier where we didn't really fight. And it is Fool's Gold scenario, where you each place 5 objectives on the enemy half of the table. 2 of them are worth 0, 2 of them are worth 1, and 1 of them is worth 2. At the end of round 3, you flip them all over to show the opponent what they are worth. So you don't really know what you're fighting for, 50% of it, until the end of round 3. So you don't know if your position is actually that great until the tokens are flipped over. So with a 3-point lead, what do I need to do in this game to win the tournament? Well, if it's a draw, then I would need to not lose by more than 200 kill points, because that would give my opponent a 4-point bonus over me. So if it's a draw, I would have to either have more kill points than the enemy, or have my opponent has less than 200 more than me, and that would mean that I would win the tournament. If I win the game, then theoretically I could win the game and still lose points if I lose loads of units and barely kill anything, but that's not likely to happen, so that's not really a factor. And if I lose the game, unless I do a huge amount of kills, then also I'm not going to win. So the position in the table, if one of us doesn't get whooped, we're pretty much going to finish first and second, unless someone gets absolutely obliterated, in which case they might drop to third or fourth. So, probably a trophy at the end of it, unless one of us does something silly. So let's find out. We've already faced each other once, so we know the strengths and weaknesses. Mostly, you'll see one thing that creeps up at one point during the game that wasn't something I was aware of, but we'll get to that. So we've got some difficult terrain, got a wall, difficult terrain and a wall, lots of difficult terrain. So there's going to be lots of hindered charges, which for my high defense force is obviously good against all the thunderous charge in the enemy army, which would be lost when making hindered charges. So that's a plus. On the other side, I have to spread out on this mission because, well, somewhat. Because the objectives I need in order to secure a draw, I've put in a triangle there. The 2 point there, 1 point there, 1 point there. If I hold those, it'll be a draw on the scenario. However, if I put my entire army over here, it's immediately obvious that that's where the objectives I want are located, and that also leaves me open to being flanked and the enemy sweeping round with their much faster, hard-hitting, thunderous charge units. So I do have to spread out. I'm using this building as the end of my battle line, sort of, and I've just got one golem horde here, because I don't know where the enemy points are that are going to be worth anything. I know the ones that I've put down over on that side are 0, so that one and that one are 0. So I just want these 3. If I can do that and keep the losses to a minimum and try and score evenly with the enemy, then that's going to do it for me. So let's see how that goes. So here we go. Turn 1. And my opponent goes first. I think I gave my opponent the choice of going first, because that way I can maybe jump onto some of these objectives in the last turn. So, a bit of an advance. Obviously, there's probably some value in this token down here, because those doggos are looking right at it. They probably want to go down there and just sit on that for the whole game. And they are actually vermin rats. They're just represented by dogs, I think. So, there is the Flying Overmaster. And not a hugely ambitious, adventurous opening, but it is an advance. Turn 1 for me, and I've moved my 2 Titans that don't care about difficult terrain into the woods, because they've both got Strider. I face my Flyer this way, because this Golem Horde is actually in charge range of some of these incredibly fast units. So I'm saying, would you like to come and charge me and then get flank charged by my Flyer? Go for it. Over here I've put my Grotesques on the hill staring down the enemy Flyer, because he's just going to fly behind me probably, so I've put my Gargoyles pointing that way in case he does, so I can still charge him with them and tie him up for a turn. And I just want to get my Immortal Guard ideally to this 1 point objective, because they're slow and they won't get back into the game, but they don't want to if they're sitting on an objective, and then the Grotesques maybe onto the 2 point objective to maybe trade with Gargoyles later on. And I've got 2 Golem Hordes heading this way as well. So I need to get that one as well, ideally. So I am hoping to push through the middle with all this big rock wall. Probably these 2, because everything on this side is more designed to kind of hold up the enemy lines. So, but you can't do that at the expense of losing units, as I said, because otherwise I wouldn't win the tournament. If it's only a draw and I lose more than 200 points worth of models compared to the enemy army, then I would actually finish second. So a draw is a big risk going for that. So I can't afford to lose too much. And anything I can kill is a big bonus, because it just puts me closer to the goal. So what I want to do with the Grotesques is probably kill this unit as well. Just these slaves, just to get me a few points on the board. Don't want to leave anything alive, especially a scoring unit. So it's already way more adventurous than our previous game in the earlier round. on to turn 2. So, okay, here's an interesting thing. When I was measuring charge distance options for my flyer, I put the tape measure down and saw that this unit was just inside 20 and everyone else was out of range. So I don't know what happened, because then at the start of the enemy next turn, the tape measure went down and this unit, if it rolled high enough with its wild charge, and it rolled a 3, so it's got a 19-inch charge, was actually in range. So I don't know if I just moved this unit forward by mistake or something, or if I just had the tape measure at a weird angle, but that was just a miss tape measure calculation, and it's now opened up a flank charge here, which is obviously not very nice. So we're going to have a death engine in the flank of my flyer in turn 2. And the Vermintide position themselves here so it doesn't have to go over the wall to make the charge, which is obviously a good move. If it doesn't kill the flyer, I've got lots of healing and regeneration, and then it will undoubtedly get killed. So we'll see if that pays off. My opponent was actually pondering whether it was the right choice. I think I would have gone for it, because you've definitely got a chance to kill that unit, and if you do, it's going to be an uphill struggle for me. So I think it's worth the risk. Over here, these units just trying to look for flanks into my Titans, and let's see what happens here. So a bit of damage done there. I think that's from the Cloak of Death from the event special character, which my opponent actually had a special one that he painted rather than using the one that was provided. So 7 damage, not enough I'm afraid, Mr. Death Engine. So that's going to go down looking like a bad move, but actually it wasn't. It's just not very good attack roll. So turn 2 for me. I'm going to chase these units that are running away. Those units are dead, by the way, they're not actually there. So the Grotesques are chasing down the slaves and the Overmaster that have run away. And the Immortal Guard are just positioned on the hill. Yeah, so I surge these golems into the flank of the Death Engine and murder it, along with the dragon in the front. And then my Greater Golem charges the flank of the Mastiff Hunting Pack that were there. The Hellfane just repositions itself a little bit. So, I think I put Scorched Earth onto this unit and Weakness onto this unit, because I feel like it could be time for me to get charged. And I've got my Titans here, I've got my Flyer looking this way, looking so it can still see anyone that charges into this Golem Horde, in case I want to take something there. And anyone that hits my Titans is going to be hindered, and they're unhurt. So, I got away quite well. I didn't actually need to heal this guy this turn, because I wanted to use the spells on other things, because he's not really in danger of being charged now, and he's got regeneration, so he might get his wounds back anyway before I get the chance to heal him. So I'm just leaving him wounded for now. On to turn 3 for the enemy. So what are they going to do? They've got charge options. There's the Nightmares here. I think they might be in range to charge the Greater Golem. So, 1 unit of Nightmares and 1 Death Engine regiment charge into the Greater Golem. A Death Engine into the Hellfane. And what's going on down here? Vermintide. Nope, they are not doing that. They're going to go over here so that a Death Engine and the Chariot character can charge into my Golem Horde. Okay, so they've certainly got a chance. Obviously my opponent doesn't throw in the units that are weakened or Scorched Earth, because they're not as effective this turn. But this is the kind of thing I was talking about with this list. What I want to face is one big mega enemy unit that I can just cast Weakness on, cast Scorched Earth on, and it's going to be nowhere near as effective. But when the enemy has so many different threats that are all able to multi-charge because they're small, you can't put Weakness on everything. So this is the kind of list that did worry me going into the event, and this is the second time having to play it. Now, it was actually possible that we would have played each other again earlier than this, based on the table, but because it was an earlier round, all 4 players involved in 2 duplicate matchups agreed to switch around a bit, so we didn't play each other almost immediately afterwards. It's very possible that we would have ended up having to play each other 3 times under those circumstances. So, I prefer when tournaments don't allow duplicate matchups until the final round. Sometimes it's unavoidable. Okay, and this guy puts himself in the middle there so that they end up in different positions, which is going to give them more scope for perhaps pivoting after combat because they're not touching each other. So an interesting thing to consider there. If you can block a spot so your units can't slide all the way down, which gives you more position to maneuver after combat. Just something you can be thinking about when you're making your charges there. And this unit's just moving in as backup. So the grotesques get hit by the slaves, and this the overmaster is hiding. So obviously that's not going to end well for them. 8 damage done to my golems. 12 damage done to my golems, and they're dead. So, despite being inspired, they are gone. So they also, were these the ones with Liliana's Tear that were ignoring Brutal and Dread? They may well have been. I feel like, I don't know if my opponent had to use the tournament reroll to make that, but they're definitely dead. The Hellfane, who is not actually being hit in the flank here, I've just turned him so his nose isn't in the way, as usual. 12 damage onto the Greater Golem, but double one. So he wasn't that close to death anyway, so it's not a true double one, but it's amusing anyway. So we have lost the Golem Horde there, but on the plus side, I've accomplished what I didn't do the last time we played, which is I've got the enemy into a fight. We can now actually start hitting their strong units and trading back and forth, which is something we never got to do before, because I think my unit is very good in a grind situation. With difficult terrain on my side, which is going to take away the enemy's thunderous charge a lot. Okay, on to turn 3 for me. So the grotesques kill the slaves, turn away from the overmaster because there's no point chasing him around. He can't score, all he can do is hit someone with 5 attacks and then they'll turn around and probably kill him, so he's not going to charge them. He's better off hunting gargoyles and individuals, to be honest. So he can't do that here, so he's going to have to move to do that. In go my flyer and my other Titan. So I've got the Greater Golem and my flyer that are here, but it's impractical putting those big models that hang off their bases into this spot. So we've put some blank bases in there, and they go into this unit here. Golems into that unit there. So I've put some good damage onto these units, but haven't killed them. And they're definitely within striking distance, so next turn I'd be looking to kill these units now. And yeah, it's looking pretty good. We flip over the tokens now, so you can see those are the ones that I wanted. And my opponent has got a 2 there, a 1 there, and a 1 here. So my opponent wants this triangle here. So I'm still kind of contesting that. I haven't abandoned that area, but I'm not really going to get a chance to go and get these 2. But again, my opponent isn't going to get the chance to get these 2 either. So it's that one and that one that are in any way contested. So what do I want to do here? I want to kill this. I want to kill this unit. I could at this point send my golems towards this token, make a beeline for it, and just focus 100% on the scenario. But I feel like this area in the middle is so dicey, the enemy flanking, I need to kill units. I can't go after the token. I need to get kills, otherwise I'll get out-killed, so even if I did get a draw, I'll get out-killed and then lose the tournament on kill points because of the scoring system. So I'm not going to go straight for the objective. I'm going to keep my gargoyles and hope that they can hop onto it towards the end of the game. Instead, I'm going to charge that unit in the flank and murder it, hopefully, if it's still there. So, into the next turn. Turn 4. So, Death Engine. Special Death Engine into the flank of the Hellfane. These 2 units charge into my Greater Golem, and they do not touch the dragon. Oh, no, this is the dragon here. So they double charge the dragon. I think, oh no, they go back in there maybe, and they go into the dragon. And Hellfane is hit in the front there and the flank by these 2. So, it's at this point well, actually, it was after the damage had been allocated that I was made aware that this unit has the ability to overrun through a unit that is not an individual and make contact with the unit on the other side if it rolls high enough and then attack it. So it won't always come up because you're often fighting units that are too deep to charge through. In this situation, it's got 2 Titans lined up back to back. So that is potentially a very nasty surprise. And obviously I didn't look closely enough at the army list. And once it was mentioned, I do remember that that is a thing that exists, but I was totally unaware that this was the unit that can do that. So I did not factor that into any of my decision making. And had I known that it was able to do that, I probably wouldn't have put all my Titans in a line like that. What would I have done differently? So if I had put 1 Titan in at a time, just 1 into the centre, then it would have had a very hard time overrunning into one that was here, because it would have needed probably a 6 to reach it, which very difficult. But as it is, I think it needs a 4 because of the size of a Titan base. It needs to kill the Hellfane and then overrun with 4 inches to reach the Greater Obsidian Golem, who is near death. So, not being aware of that rule is potentially going to lose me a Titan here. Maybe 2. So, charge in the flank. These guys are involved. And the other unit's just coming over here. They're not going to be able to protect this unit's flank if they don't kill this golem horde, though. And the Hellfane does get killed with 13 damage. Then the overrun is rolled, which I think requires a 4, because, so 1 inch is slightly less than 2.5 centimeters, isn't it? And the Titan base is 75 millimeters, so it's slightly more than 3 inches. So it's slightly more than a 3-inch overrun, which makes it a 4-inch overrun required to hit that. So 50-50, and it makes it. So clearly the Great Obsidian Golem is also going to die as a result of that. And there it goes. So we're down to the dragon out of those 3 Titans. I was banking on losing 1, but I was quite happy for it to be flanked and killed because I still had 2 left. But with that, it's now looking pretty bad. So yes, especially on a rule that I didn't spot in the army list. Thankfully though, the flyer does not get killed by these units, so that's a good thing. So we've still got some hope. Now, what do I need to do? I need to start killing things first of all, because I've just lost 2 expensive units. So a draw is no good to me. I need to be killing things. I can't just go and claim that objective and try and get a draw. I've got to get in there murdering to even it to the score, otherwise I lose the tournament and finish second. So, what are we going to do? Well, they take 4 damage. So I don't think they were actually involved. I think they were fighting here. So turn 4 for me. The Immortal Guard are just going after this token, just to sit on it. The Grotesques are chilling by this one. The Gargoyles are hiding here from the Overmaster, who is over there somewhere. They don't want to get charged, and then in the last turn they could move onto the token, maybe. And, well, my golems kill a unit there. My flyer, I think, kills a unit as well. I think I kill both these units. Yep, so 2 units down. I've charged these gargoyles into the death engine because I've had enough of its shenanigans. I don't want it being able to overrun and charge into anything else. I think the only thing it could do is kill the gargoyles, and on a 6 it could hit this Ironcaster. But the position I wanted my Ironcaster to be in was here. So I think I was willing to take that risk at this point. Because even if I move him over here, for example, they could double charge the gargoyles so he ends up here and then still overrun into him. So I can accept that, I think. However, look at this. What's going on here? There was an enemy... Oh no, it's not happened yet. Spoiler alert. Not going to talk about that. Turn 5 for the enemy. So, hitting my units, mostly in the front, hitting the gargoyles. It's kind of jammed up. They can't get everyone in they want to. and I've got quite a healthy front line because I healed up and regenerated my dragon up to 4 wounds. The enemy special event character charges my special event character to stop me doing any spell casting. And the gargoyles are killed by the death engine, the special one. And they're gone, as you'd expect, but they kind of did their job there. And my event character takes 4 wounds. 4 wounds onto this horde from this chariot hero. And 7 wounds onto this horde from chariot and the nightmares. So, wounded, and I've lost the dragon, which is obviously not nice. Yeah, it just rolled really, really well, that death engine there against the dragon. 13 wounds and killed it. Yeah, so he must have done 9 damage, which I'm assuming is quite above average for that thing. I don't believe anyone else went in as well. Yeah, because that guy charged in here. Surely. To do those 4 wounds. Were they already on damage? Actually, they were, so maybe it actually got into the flank. Okay, let's go back. So, I actually think he might be up here, you know. And I think he gets into this flank because... Let's see. I'm trying to find out where he is. Okay, there he is. So, yes. He does actually have a flank there. So he gets into the flank. It is hindered. So that's why I was fairly confident in leaving it exposed to not give the death engine a flank. But in the end, it does do enough to kill the dragon. But not these units. So, in terms of scoring, we've killed quite a lot each so far. I think my opponent is mildly ahead on kill points, so I still need to address that and make it a draw on victory points as well. So, I've got the 2-point objective and the 1-point objective. So, turn 5 for me. And what's this? My special event hero is moved over here. But obviously he couldn't do any spells, so it was the Hex caster who moved down here somewhere, cast weakness onto the enemy chaff unit, and killed them with the damage from it. So that means the enemy are not on that 1-point objective, and they're going to struggle to reach enough of them if the game ends on turn 6. So we could be heading for a very interesting conclusion here. My gargoyles fly over. I decide, you know what, I can't risk this unit charging anybody because they're just going to wipe out my centre and I'm going to lose on kill points. So even if I do get a draw out of it, then losing on kill points means that I would lose and finish second anyway. So I can't just move them onto the objective on turn 6. I have to block now. However, the way it works out, I actually waver this unit anyway. So I'm not 100% sure I needed to block them. But obviously I can't foresee that I was going to waver the unit of nightmares with the golems, because I think the nightmares were unhurt. Let's go back. They may be, or maybe it's just 1 wound perhaps. So I couldn't foresee that I was going to do that to them. So blocking with the gargoyles means that they can no longer score, but this unit can only fight them now next turn. Another thing that does, unfortunately though, it now frees up the Overmaster, because he was kind of lying in wait, waiting for the gargoyles to move so he could kill them. So that's why I was going to wait till turn 6 to pounce, but I felt like if I didn't put them here, I was just going to lose on kill points and finish second with a draw. So, the enemy has a chaff unit here, so they can get to the 2-point objective, but not the 1-point objective next turn. On to turn 6. So the enemy get onto the 2-point objective, they move a unit there, so if there's a turn 7 they can get onto both of them. The enemy special character attacks my special character, again. We've got a couple of death engines into this horde, those guys are wavered so they can't do anything, and those guys into the gargoyles. So, this guy also comes and lands here, which means that I can't shuffle sideways to get towards the objective now. So that one might be lost to me. My event special character is dead, but that's okay at this stage because he's not worth any points. Gargoyles are dead, as you'd expect. And how much damage is going to get done to the golems? 8, but they're not dead. So, the way it stands at the moment, if I can kill a couple of units, or maybe just one unit, and that unit's certainly going to die, and then the game ends at the end of turn 6, the kill points are sufficiently close that no one's getting any bonus points, which means that if it ends at the end of turn 6, I will win the tournament. Let's find out. So, I tried to cast weakness on this unit to try and kill them, or even wavering them would be okay, because it keeps them away from the objective. But I don't think I accomplished that. And over here, this guy can't attack me anymore because he's on a 1-point objective and he can't move from it. I kill off that horde of nightmares, and that is how the game is looking. So, that is a dead pile in that corner. So all that stuff is dead. So all this stuff is alive. So it's not that much. But if the game ends now at the end of turn 6, I go home with a first place trophy. If the game does not end at the end of turn 6, then what's going to happen? My opponent is going to get onto the 1-point objective. They're going to get on the 2-point objective. The Hexcaster will probably get attacked by the event special character and wounded, so I can't attack those units in my turn 6, so they will score. I've got no way to get the Death Engine, so that will score, which means I would have to get to that objective, which is not possible. Because if these guys charge in here, I can't turn and surge into this guy and then overrun onto the objective. I also can't move the grotesques onto that objective and then also get anyone onto the 2-point objective, because there's just not enough I can't reach. So I can't even get in a position where, for example, if I were to able to turn them and move them up here, I wouldn't be able to move them far enough to prevent them blocking, like this unit turning completely backwards and then using both my casters to surge it towards the objective, because this grotesque unit couldn't make it far enough out the way, so they would just get blocked by it. So, pretty much, we're probably going to end with roughly equal kill points. So if the game ends now, I win. If there's a turn 7, I lose and finish second. The suspense builds. So one dice roll. One dice is going to be thrown. In 50% of all known universes, I win this tournament. In 50% of all known universes, I finish second at this tournament. Which universe are we inhabiting? There's a turn 7. So the dice came up, I think it rolled a 6 actually. So the game continues, which means I'm going to finish second at the tournament. So, if someone offered you before an event the chance to be in a position where a 50-50 dice roll decides if you win an event or finish second, I think you would take that offer. I think pretty much everyone would snap someone's hand off for that chance. So getting into that position, I'm very pleased with that. I'm very pleased with this army list. But anyway, let's go through the turn 7 anyway, because some more stuff's going to die. So we've got some more charges going in on my golems who have been healed up. And my Hexcaster gets killed by the event special character. Those golems get killed. The grotesques can't move because I need them to score 2 tournament points. They have to stay on that. However, I've still got the option of surging these guys, so they can turn around and surge into the wounded nightmares and kill them off. So that's what I'm going to do. They can't move though, because the token is right there. So, they're not dead, so it's still open. So my turn 7, they spin round, surged into the flank, kill the nightmares, and that is enough to make us roughly equal on kill points. So, we both score a lot of points for that game, and my opponent wins the tournament by 3 points. If the game had ended at the end of turn 6, I think the kill point situation was about the same, where neither of us had the advantage. So there would have been a 4-point swing. So if the game had ended right there, I would have won the event by 1 point by my count. Wow. So can't feel too bad about that. Can't feel too bad about a second place trophy. This is the second time I've actually won second place at the Swords of Summer event. The last one was at the final BritCon that was held in Manchester, which was a few years ago. The last one was in Nottingham. It seems to follow me around the country, BritCon. So very pleased with the list. And I can't really complain about that 50-50 dice roll at the end of the final game to decide whether I finish first or second. That's like a dream situation. So, really happy with that. I think my list is very, very strong. That slave list was the one list I was concerned about, and I had to play it twice. It would have been interesting to play against... Let's see, I played against the slaves twice, I played against 2 different dwarf lists. So not as much variety as you'd normally get at a 5-game event. And what I'm thinking is, for Clash of Kings, I might take a very, very similar list. Possibly. I'm going to tinker with it because it's lower point level Clash of Kings. The least efficient thing in my list is probably the Hellfane. It's 265 points, which is a lot. It has lower nerve than the Greater Obsidian Golem, but it's not shambling, which is kind of a plus and a minus when you've got 2 Ironcasters. And it's the same speed, it's also got Strider, it can shoot, but it's just 30 more points for less nerve. So, would the Hellfane be the one to come out if I need to drop points? I could then put something else in that's not as expensive. Would the list still work the same with only 4 big Defense 6 units, backed up by the Grotesques and the Immortal Guard? Perhaps. Might still work exactly the same. Which units performed particularly well for me? I think it was just the combination of them. It was no one unit. It was the fact that my entire army, apart from the chaff, is really, really tough to get rid of. It's tough to waver any of it. Most of it can't be wavered. I've got waver mitigation in the list as well. I've got so much healing and regeneration around, and the small little artifacts I put on my golem hordes to get wounds back as well. It was just really tough for people to deal with. So I think that is a very strong list. So I might take something similar to Clash of Kings if I don't get tempted to take the Night Stalkers again. I'm working on a couple of new models for that army at the moment. I've got one on the table right now, which I'm not going to spoil. I've not started painting it yet. And so this was at BritCon. Should I have a couple of words on BritCon? So, I'm trying to word this as politely as possible. BritCon is not a very good event. So, tournaments, it's fine. It's got plenty of tournaments running. I'm sure they're all organised fine. But it's supposed to be more than a tournament weekend. It's supposed to actually be a bit of a trade show as well. There are people with stands there. There's just not a lot of people that seem to be buying from them. And if you're a historical player, there's more stuff there that interests you, because there are lots of bland, kind of very tiny ancient soldiers or Napoleonics or what have you, the kind of stuff that wouldn't really interest me. The demographic of the event is extremely old compared to other tournament events or trade show events, I would say. It's very, very historical focused. They do not seem to advertise the event at all. I'd never even heard of it, even though it runs for years. The only reason I've heard that it exists is because Kings of War tournaments were taking place there. That's the only reason. Otherwise, I would not have heard of it, even though it's been going for a long time. Most people in Nottingham don't know it's going on. I think it took halfway through day 1 until they had a sign outside the building with BritCon written on it. They close the trading at 2 PM on Sunday, I think, when most people are playing games. So maybe they would get a chance to go between games, but you're closing like 2.5 hours before the game's finished, so you can't even go and browse the shops after your final game's finished. It's just not a very good event. I wouldn't even call it like a convention or a trade show, because it doesn't really qualify for those. So it is really just a big tournament hall with some shops that sell stuff that might interest you if you're into historical miniatures. The bring and buy didn't really have anything exciting. It was mostly just people's like painted like 8mm armies, I think, which is probably just like a commission painter trying to get rid of their stuff, which isn't really what a bring and buy you'd expect to see in there, but it was like half the stuff in there. There was some Kings of War items in there, apparently. I think one person was going to go back when it officially opened to buy some Kings of War stuff that was actually pretty cheap, but someone else went in there before opening time and bought all of it, so that was quite funny. Any other thoughts on BritCon in general? Now, the people actually organising the individual tournaments, no issues whatsoever, because they're not involved in the actual management of the overall event. It's the overall event that I think is kind of garbage, but the tournaments, good. There was a bolt action event right behind me for most of it. The side of the table I was mostly playing on, the bolt action event was behind, and that seemed to have quite a lot of players. So that was doing alright. There were lots of other games on lots of little tiny playing areas with very small scale miniatures that I wasn't familiar with, but everyone seemed to be having a good time playing those. So as far as a tournament event, it's fine if you know it exists, which maybe you don't, because they don't advertise. But if you wanted to buy things, I didn't really see any particularly enticing prices on anything. It was mostly just what you would pay if you were ordering from like an Element Games or a Firestorm. I didn't see anything that was blowing their prices out the water. So it's like kind of behind the times. Can you really go to an event like that, set up shop, and not sell things at enticing prices? I suppose you're relying on impulse buys, but then everyone's playing in tournaments. There aren't really many people there who aren't playing in events, in the tournaments. So are you going to get enough customers to make it worth it? I would say most of the traders probably didn't have enough customers from what I saw. Some of them were just sitting and not even anyone browsing every time I went past. So, interesting. I don't know. I'm sure it'll continue in its current form until the player base gets too old to play anymore, because it is an aging event, I would say. Much older demographic than most events. The last Swords of Summer Kings of War event I think had more players, but I think this one is very close to Clash of Kings, so that's probably why, because Clash of Kings is coming up in a very similar location, which is also in the middle of Nottingham, and that's got over 150 players signed up. So that's probably why this one had 12 players. And it was still really fun though. The actual games were some of the best games I've had, I think. I think my list was really strong. I think I made a couple of mistakes, obviously, as you always do in these games. Nothing too annoying. There was obviously the one of not studying the opposing army list to find out that it could overrun through your non-individual units. And the occasional like turning of a unit, not realising it was in range, but nothing that was too costly. And the dice weren't too crazy either way. I didn't have amazingly good dice, or amazingly bad, or amazingly good or bad against me. There wasn't a game where I thought the dice were just ridiculously for or against me, to be honest. There weren't too many double one incidents to report. And overall, it was just really good games of Kings of War. I really enjoyed playing that very good list, I think. Very powerful, built to be powerful, not just built to be pretty, like a lot of my recent lists have been. And obviously I'm having good success with the Abyssal Dwarfs. I finished first at the Morgoth's... Is it Morgoth's Revenge? I think they're all Morgoth's something, but it was at Black Dragon anyway. And I finished first in that one with Abyssal Dwarfs. I think I had a bit of bad luck in the follow-up event to that, which was Cogs of War, with the Abyssal Dwarves as well. I think I got a bit unlucky in that one, not to do better. And then I went back to the Night Stalkers, and I have very mixed results with them, because I don't take very competitive lists. I think I could put together competitive lists with the Night Stalkers now. I just have to get away from my fondness for the multiple Shadow Hulks, I think, because it's not the most efficient way to kill things, because they don't have many attacks. So, this has been quite a long video. Nearly 3 hours, actually. They were very, very deep, strategic games, though. We had quite a few viewers throughout, which is nice. So, any last-minute comments? Forsen says, I'd already seen the result on Facebook, but it was still exciting that you got so close. Yes, it was very, very exciting, and Bart, yes, hopefully the future of the Abyssal Dwarves is bright. I think the big defense 6 wall with healing and little healing items when you've got points to spare is very strong, and other tough to crack units as well that are defense 5 with regeneration. I think that's a really strong list archetype, and I'm going to continue tinkering with it more to see if I want to take something similar to Clash of Kings. So everyone, don't forget to like the video, obviously. Don't forget to check out all the links in the description, social media shenanigans, there's Twitter, Facebook, Discord server and all that good stuff. And obviously, if you enjoy the content on this channel and you want to treat it as the lighthouse that it is to guide you away from the stormy seas of wargaming misery and towards the bright, sunny lands of wargaming and spiritual fulfillment, then why not pledge your entire life savings on Patreon or PayPal, which are also linked down there. Which, at the moment, I think the amounts per month I get on Patreon pretty much pays for like half a tournament ticket, I think. So it definitely helps. So thanks to anyone that's pledged already on there. And Dicey said, nice to catch up. Yeah, I'll have to have another look and see what's going on your channel, actually. I haven't seen yours in a while. I'll have to have a peek later on. So, I think that just about wraps up for this video. Hope you all enjoyed this in-depth, deep probing analysis of red, hot, spicy, tender, succulent, moist, finger-licking good, dishlicious Kings of War content, and the Abyssal Dwarves. Razor-thin, 50-50 dice roll to win the tournament. This time ends up with second place. If I've put myself in that position enough times, I will win half of those tournaments though. So hopefully I'll fall asleep and I'll wake up in one of the universes where the dice actually landed in my favour at the end there. Okay, time to wrap this one up. So all that remains to be said is, good night out there, whatever you are.